Contrary to popular belief, Mark Zuckerberg isn't actually a robot, and he's not just some meme. He's extremely socially awkward, sure, but that awkwardness is exactly what allows him to hide in plain sight. Underneath the dead eyes and piss-poor communication skills, Zuck is calculated, manipulative, and only becoming more dangerous with each and every day. You see, Mark has spent the last 20 years doing everything he can to gain more power, more money, and more control, always at the expense of everyone around him. In just one lifetime, Mark has managed to turn platforms built around genuine connection into addiction machines. Then, he used those addiction machines to create one of the most invasive surveillance empires on Earth. After that, he turned that surveillance into the most widespread psychological manipulation tool ever built. But in Zuck's world, it doesn't really matter what he does or how bad it gets, because no one's actually holding him accountable. There's way too much to talk about and not enough people paying attention. As a result of this, Mark has ascended into a completely different version of reality. A world where exploitation is optimization, addiction is engagement, PR disasters are just shortcuts for growth, and worst of all, a world where words don't actually have any meaning. They're just tools to win people over.
And our incentives are aligned with helping people connect with the people they want, have meaningful interactions, not just getting people to watch a bunch of content that they're going to resent later that they did that.
There's this meme out there that frankly is wrong, that says that, okay, our algorithms just try to find things that are going to kind of enrage people somehow, and that's what we try to show people, and that's not actually how our systems work.
Just like Mark's ability to lie, Meta's greed is limitless, and sooner or later, they'll hit the point of no return. Even trillion-dollar lies have expiration dates, so despite the record-breaking revenues, it might just be Meta's time. They're currently being sued by over 40 states for designing platforms that addict children and destroy their mental health. The FTC is coming after them for running an illegal monopoly, and they have damning internal documents to prove it. But Zuck's not worried at all. Despite the government's performative efforts to hold him accountable after cashing in their quarterly lobbying checks from his company, the reality is, Mark is basically untouchable, and he's made his end goal abundantly clear. Full digital immersion, endless invasions of your privacy, and the power to shape your thoughts and behaviors. No joke, this stuff is so dystopian, it makes Black Mirror look like a sitcom.
So in your ideal world, someone would be using the Quest headset in their home and then wear out the glasses? Is that kind of the relationship between those two?
Yeah, I mean...
Will we have AI-generated influencers with AI-generated captions and avatars talking to avatars?
Yeah, I think we'll have all of it.
Then, of course, the full vision is you just have like a full field of view holograms where, you know, we're having this conversation in the future and like I'm sitting on your couch next to you as a hologram and we're just there and we have this full sense of presence. Here we are.
Of course Mark wants you living inside of technology 24/7, because the more time you spend in his world, the less you'll notice how badly he's destroying ours. You might have thought Mark is just another greedy CEO, but this isn't just about greed, it's something way darker. This isn't a story about a man who built a company. This is a story about a company who built a man and corrupted him in the process. Mark stole the idea for the company that he founded, then turned around and stabbed his own best friend in the back and stole his shares, all before the age of 21. Being a cutthroat technocrat is all Mark knows. Profit, power, and control, no matter the cost. It should be no surprise that even after he already controlled more social media users than anyone else, he still wanted more. That's when he set his sights on breaking into China, doing everything he could to get Facebook past the Great Firewall, sharing foreign user data with the CCP, building censorship tools. He even went as far as offering Xi Jinping a chance to name his unborn baby. That alone would be enough to ruin anyone else's legacy, but not Zuck. Instead of turning himself in, he later went on to create arguably the worst invention in all of human history, the Metaverse.
So let's start by exploring what different kinds of metaverse experiences could feel like.
Trap him.
I can't move
Don't let him free.
Don't let him
Don't
leave.
let him free. Take pictures
Surround
of him.
and take pictures of him without his permission.
Take pictures of him. Surround him.
So that's a glimpse of the kinds of experiences that you might have in the metaverse.
But look, that stuff is all old news. Mark has reinvented his image. He got a sick new haircut, he likes MMA, Zuck is so chill nowadays, he even went on Joe Rogan's podcast. So let's just completely forget about the fact that his company makes the lives of 1 in 3 teen girls worse, according to their own internal research, or how their VR headsets and AR glasses track every centimeter your eyes move, record your voice, and even map the walls of your home straight from their own privacy policy. Instead, let's just talk about how insanely chill he is.
I feel like you want your car to have almost as much horsepower as your helicopter. I feel like as a rule of thumb.
This guy is so evil, I can feel the data being sucked out of my soul even when he's talking about helicopters. Yet, he's in full control of one of the most powerful corporations on Earth. He's one of the wealthiest people to ever exist, and he's got a grip on international power that's tighter than most governments. Mark's platforms shape how billions see the world, how they think, and how society functions. But it still seems like no one's telling the full story here. And what you don't know is exactly what Mark is counting on. So today, we're gonna take a deep dive into Mark Zuckerberg and how he became as corrupt as he is today, his company, Meta, and their anti-competitive practices, his new fake rebrand, and just really dissect this empire, which honestly should have been stopped years ago.
I think it's probably gonna be a banger.
All we do here is go back.
Thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. The internet is an incredible place, but it's also incredibly scary. There's data leaks, scams, and all kinds of other people out there just waiting to steal your information so they can sell it to advertisers. God forbid you clicked on the wrong link one time and suddenly your brand new laptop is basically a frisbee. That's where the sponsor of today's video comes in, NordVPN. It's one of the most convenient and secure VPNs out there, and it even includes Threat Protection Pro, which blocks phishing links before they can do any harm. With just one click, NordVPN encrypts your data, which makes your data unreadable to hackers and safe from malicious attacks. So even if someone intercepts your data, they can't see anything. With just one account, you can use NordVPN to protect up to 10 devices like your laptop, phone, and tablet. And don't even get me started on the speed of NordVPN. Most other VPNs turn your internet into dial-up. Nord, on the other hand, is lightning fast. Get NordVPN's 2-year plan plus 4 extra months free at nordvpn.com/kingofnothing. It's completely risk-free with their 30-day money-back guarantee. Right off the bat, we need to understand, Mark Zuckerberg is one of the least trustworthy people to ever speak into a microphone. Since Facebook's inception in 2004, Mark has been telling the entire world that everything he does is about one thing: connection.
You know, for me, this stuff is all about helping people connect. Right? We're not a social app company. We are a social connection company. My life's work is around human connection. Human connection. I actually think that connecting people in India is one of the most important things that we can do for the whole world. For most of our existence, we focused on all the good that connecting people can bring.
Connecting one community at a time and keeping at it until one day we can connect the whole world.
And that sounds amazing. I mean, humans were literally built to be social, but Mark doesn't care about that at all. He cares about turning our desire for connection into whatever is the easiest to monetize. Recently at an antitrust hearing, Mark testified under oath that in 2023, only 22% of the content people consumed on Facebook and 11% on Instagram was posted by users' friends. So roughly 80 to 90% of what people see has nothing to do with connection. Yet, in every single interview he does, Mark goes out of his way to mention how much of a hard-on he has for connection, despite the fact that every time he has to talk to someone, he gets so uncomfortable, he acts like he's being held hostage.
Welcome to How to Build the Future. Today our guest is Mark Zuckerberg. Mark, you have built one of the most influential companies in the history of the world, so we are especially excited that you are here.
I'm not sure where to go from there.
What I believe that we were trying to say
was, and what I stand behind.
You drink coffee, man, or no?
Nah.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, you've had it.
I have.
But what really defines a company isn't the propaganda they put out or the insanely awkward interview clips of their CEO. It's what goes on beneath the surface. And under the surface of Meta, Mark and his company have been completely corrupted since day one. This was never a story of good intentions gone wrong, it was rotten from the very beginning. With that being said, I think it's only fair that we start from day one.
Lay it on us.
If you've seen the movie The Social Network, you might have thought that Mark originally started Facebook because he was just some angry incel who was crashing out after his girlfriend broke up with him. And although the movie definitely dramatizes certain things for entertainment purposes, that part is kinda true. In October of 2003, Mark's girlfriend at the time did actually break up with him. And in true nerd fashion, instead of simply calling a friend and talking through his feelings like a normal person, he started blogging about her on the internet and crying about how she was allegedly a bitch. Mark needed something to occupy his mind, so he quickly took control of the situation and used this breakup as an opportunity to create his first version of social media. This incredible, hot new website was called Facemash, and the idea was simple. Mark was going to hack into each Harvard dorm house's internal database, save all the women's ID photos, then upload those photos to Facemash so people could vote on which students were more attractive by clicking left or right. Then he was going to create an algorithm which ranked the women numerically based on how often people clicked right on them. It was kind of like Hot or Not, except the photos on that site were supposed to be self-submitted. Facemash was way worse. Nobody chose to be on this site, and it only used real photos of Mark's actual classmates. So there's no doubt that Mark has been an absolute tech genius since day one. I mean, not many other people could have come up with the idea of objectifying other humans by ranking their physical appearances on a leaderboard.
Yeah. I mean, you don't need to convince me.
In all seriousness, Facemash probably doesn't sound very impressive, and that's because it wasn't. Frankly, it was kind of weird. Keep in mind, this was in 2003, before there were pictures of everyone all over the internet, so this was invasive as hell. But even by today's standards, hacking into a database just to publicly post photos of strangers online would be considered insane. In fact, it was so insane that even Mark himself said in his blog, "One thing is certain, and it's that I'm a jerk for making this site." And the landing page of the site said, "Were we let in for our looks? No. Will we be judged on them? Yes." So this guy claimed that it's okay to publicly judge people based on their physical appearance. I'm not going to judge his looks, I'm too ethical, but I'm just not sure if Mark was the best guy to be spreading that message. Regardless, Facemash actually went viral at Harvard somehow. Within hours, Facemash got more than 20,000 votes, and some reports even claim that the site crashed Harvard's internet servers. And believe it or not, this silly little site was actually the foundation of Facebook. Although the two sites didn't share any code, they shared something way more important: Mark's mindset. Facemash was the first time Mark learned that he could blatantly violate people's privacy, and the worst he'd get was a slap on the wrist. Because Mark was accused by the Harvard ad board of breaching security, violating people's privacy, and copyright infringement, all of which he actually did, and his punishment was probation. He wasn't expelled or even just suspended. So Facemash laid the groundwork for Facebook's business model early on. Scrape first, ask never, exploit the user, then scale it right until someone notices. And that mindset ended up defining Mark's infamous leadership style early on.
We want to build our culture and our infrastructure so that we just try to move, one or two clicks faster than other companies. And, sometimes we go too fast and we mess up a bunch of stuff and then we have to fix it. And that's cool.
Is that cool? Is that cool at all, Mark?
But to be fair to Mark, he was only 19 when he made Facemash, and everyone makes mistakes when they're younger. However, making a mistake at 19 doesn't give anyone a pass to repeatedly lie for 2 decades straight.
That movie made it seem like Facemash was so important to starting Facebook. It wasn't.
I wanted to build this prank website.
What was a prank site? What was it? That wasn't Facebook, though.
No, it was this thing called Facemash.
people cast it as if like Facemash, that prank thing that I made, was the precursor to Facebook. I guess maybe because they have face in the name, both or something. But I made a lot of stuff when I was at Harvard. Facemash was like, it was a prank that I made.
It was a prank. It was kind of funny, but it also a little bit in poor taste.
As we'll come to see in this video, Mark genuinely thinks that everyone else is stupid, so he often just flat out lies or says words that make no sense because he knows 99% of people won't look past the headlines. Facemash wasn't just a prank at all. A prank is typically a harmless joke that doesn't actually negatively affect people, like this.
Hi, do you want any black tar heroin?
What? Why would I want that?
I'm just asking. I'm just offering, you know?
No.
No, are you sure? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That's a prank. But if he actually had black tar heroin in his back pocket and was ready to sell it, then it's not a prank, it's a felony. So pretending to cross the line is a prank. Actually hacking an internal database to steal photos is a crime under Massachusetts law, and violating people's privacy by publicly posting private pictures is weird and unnecessary. Calling it a prank 2 decades later is a calculated misrepresentation at best and a convenient lie at worst. Because he knows that if people think Facemash was just some harmless prank, they won't realize this really weird thing he did was actually the foundation of his empire.
Put up pictures of 2 women and decide which one was the better, more attractive of the 2, is that right?
Congressman, that is an accurate description of the prank website that I made.
In November of 2003, about a month after the whole Facemash debacle, 2 twins named Cameron and Tyler Winkelvoss and their roommate Divya Narendra were working on their own early version of social media called Harvard Connection. As the name suggests, it was a Harvard-based social network designed to help fellow students connect online, with plans to later expand into other universities. Now, these guys didn't invent social media. At the time, sites like Friendster and MySpace were exploding in popularity. But what made the Harvard Connection concept unique was that you needed a harvard.edu email to join, and people are naturally drawn to things that they can't easily get into.
The main difference between what we're talking about in MySpace or Friendster or any of those other social networking sites
is exclusivity. Right.
That's exactly what made Harvard Connection such a great idea. Social networks can grow really fast if they're able to get off the ground and get your friends to sign up. Because once your friends join, you join, then your other friends join, and before you know it, half the world's on the app. But there was one major problem with Harvard Connection. None of the founders actually knew how to code. Not even the Indian one. So they had to hire other people to program the site for them. By November 2003, they'd already gone through 2 developers, and the site still wasn't ready for release after almost a year of work. So naturally, they turned to the nerd who had just become infamous on campus, Mark Zuckerberg, and brought him on in exchange for equity in the company.
We would need you to build the site, write the code, and we'll provide all the...
I'm in.
What?
I'm in.
Awesome.
At first, Mark made it seem like he was fully on board. The same night after their first meeting, Mark told them, "I read over all the stuff you sent and it seems like it shouldn't take too long to implement, so we can talk about that after I get all the basic functionality up tomorrow night." And for the first few days, Mark was playing the part perfectly. He was sending updates, acting like he was fully committed to the project. However, on December 4th, 2003, things started to change. Mark began isolating himself from the team, answering their emails less and less frequently, while still assuring them that he was working behind the scenes. Over the course of the next month and a half, Mark continued to string them along, making excuse after excuse about how he was too busy.
We were always under the impression that Mark was working on HarvardConnection.com. There was never an indication from him that he could not do the work, didn't want to do the work, or was working on something identical on the side.
That site was called The Facebook. And no, he didn't just get inspired, he straight up stole their idea. We know this definitively because 1, there's no evidence that Mark was working on anything Facebook related before agreeing to work on Harvard Connection. 2, Mark made it abundantly clear that he was going to screw them over from the very beginning. In these IMs here, which took place about a week after his initial meeting with the Harvard Connection team, Mark was telling his eventual Facebook co-founder, Eduardo Saverin, "Check this site out. Someone is already trying to make a dating site, but they made a mistake, haha. They asked me to make it for them. so I'm like delaying it so it won't be ready until after the Facebook thing comes out. In these messages here, Mark starts probing his friends for ideas on how to handle this situation, while starting to map out the betrayal. At the bottom, he says, I also hate the fact that I'm doing it for other people, haha, like I hate working under other people, which he probably should have told them, not some external third party. I feel like the right thing to do is to finish the Facebook and wait until the last day before I'm supposed to have their thing ready and be like, yours isn't as good as this, so if you want to join mine, you can. Otherwise, I can help you with yours later. But Mark didn't even have the balls to do that. In their final in-person meeting on January 14th, 2004, Mark repeated his usual line about being too busy, and for the first time, started to express some doubts about the project. But he still didn't admit that he was building a competitor, or the fact that he had just registered the domain thefacebook.com 3 days earlier.
You sent 36 emails to Mr. Zuckerberg and received 16 emails in return, and this was the first time he indicated he was not happy.
That's correct. You had 42 days to study our system and get out ahead.
Do you see any of your code on Facebook?
Sorry, could
Mark, did I use any of your code?
You stole our whole goddamn idea.
Fellas.
Facebook ended up launching on February 4th, 2004, and it was an instant success, with more than 1,000 Harvard students signing up in the first 24 hours, and the rest is history. But just to make this clear, Facebook wasn't doing anything revolutionary early on. Mark was clearly a talented programmer, of course, but ultimately, a social network only works if people are posting content onto the site. So that exclusivity factor with no competition early on gave Facebook the perfect launchpad for exponential growth. Harvard Connection ended up rebranding to Connect You and first launched on May 21st, 2004, but it was dead on arrival. Their whole value proposition was exclusivity, but exclusivity only works if you're first.
This is a good guy.
We don't know that he's not a good guy.
We know he stole our idea. We know he lied to our faces for a month and a half.
No, he never lied to our faces.
Okay, he never saw our faces, fine. He lied to our email accounts, and he gave himself a 42-day head start because he knows what apparently you don't, which is that getting there first is everything.
Now, Mark might argue that stealing the idea doesn't matter, because ideas are worthless, execution is everything. Keep in mind, this is the same guy who once said, you can be unethical and still be legal. That's the way I live my life, haha. But if Mark's platform was so much better, why would he have sabotaged his competitors? Mark only did what he did because he knew they were a real threat to his success. So this wasn't all just some genius business strategy, it was deceiving, deliberate, and straight up malicious. So have you decided what you're gonna do about the websites? Yeah, I'm going to fuck them, probably in the ear.
This kid is still around. Nobody's knocked his fucking 2 front teeth out yet.
I don't know how this guy's still walking around.
How is it that nobody has knocked that guy the fuck out and left him where they found him in the street? Really? How is this even possible? That little fucking weasel, that little fucking twerp, nobody's knocked that kid the fuck out? I don't understand it. I really don't. Really?
He's always with a security guard.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I think this situation is a perfect example of where Law & Order gets things wrong, because not all bad things are legal, and although most people do a good job of controlling their more malicious side, some guys like Mark just don't use that part of their brains, and those guys need to be shoved in a locker every now and then, starting from a young age, in order to stop behavior like this at its roots. There's just something deeply wrong with a 19-year-old man who treats people the way Mark did in this situation just for the crime of offering him the opportunity to work together. Cause it's one thing to steal an idea. Everyone does bad things every now and then. It's 100 times worse to join the team of the people you're stealing from with the sole intention of beating them to market with their own idea and then turn around and brag about how you're going to fuck them in the ear. What Mark did here wasn't just bad, it was calculated, parasitic, and evil.
A lot of times people are just like too careful. I think it's more useful to like make things happen and then like apologize later than it is to make sure that you dot all your I's now and then like just not get stuff done.
I would describe Mark's style of entrepreneurship early on as chaotic. Mark did whatever he wanted to whoever he wanted. And by the way, why would he not? when there's never a price to pay for your actions, every boundary just becomes an invitation. So shortly after Facebook launched, the Harvard Connection team filed a complaint with the Harvard newspaper, The Crimson, and once they began investigating the situation, they made the crucial mistake of offering Mark an opportunity to defend himself. So what do you think Mark did? He found the profiles of the reporters on Facebook, checked for failed login attempts, then used those failed passwords to access their Harvard email accounts so he could read what they were saying about him in advance.
That's fucking illegal.
But again, no consequences, so Mark didn't just stop there. In the summer of 2004, after the release of ConnectU, Mark hacked into the ConnectU website and made a new profile for Cameron Winkelvoss, and he made some pretty suspicious decisions. He listed Cameron as 7'4", his hair color as Aryan blonde, his body type as athletic, and his eye color as sky blue. In addition to coming out of the closet during this hack, Mark also logged into the accounts of certain ConnectU users and changed their privacy settings to invisible so it was harder for people to find their accounts. Later, he even went as far as deactivating about 20 ConnectU accounts entirely so he can reduce their user base. This is just bizarre at this point. All these guys did to Mark was get stolen from and then let people know what he did. If anyone should be trying to get revenge, it should be them. And to a certain extent, they did get their revenge. A few months after Facebook's launch, the twins Endivia sued Mark and Facebook for stealing their idea, and after a 4-year legal battle, Mark settled this lawsuit for a reported $65 million. Now, although a settlement isn't a legal admission of guilt, in this case, it is, at least rhetorically. You don't need to be a lawyer to know that a man who did absolutely nothing wrong doesn't just hand the people suing him $65 million. If Mark wants to send me $65 mil, I'll gladly take it, but something tells me he's not exactly the most generous guy.
Giving everyone the freedom to pursue purpose isn't going to be free. People like me should pay for it.
Mark is just a kind, selfless, compassionate guy, which is why the best example of Mark being an absolute scumbag isn't even what he did to the Winkelvoss twins, it's what he did to his co-founder and best friend at the time, Eduardo Saverin. Eduardo told the whole story in this book, The Accidental Billionaires, which went on to become The Social Network. And if you've read it or seen the movie, you know that without Eduardo, there would be no Facebook. Because Eduardo was the one who helped fund Facebook before it was even a registered domain. At first, Eduardo invested $1,000 to pay for server costs, and Mark and Eduardo agreed to split the company 70-30, which made sense because on paper, these two were the perfect duo. Mark was the geek who handled the coding and technical side of things, and Eduardo was the CFO who wore a suit everywhere because he was the head of the investment society at Harvard. Most importantly though, Eduardo wasn't just an investor, he was Mark's friend first and foremost. Even after the Facemash blunder, Eduardo had Mark's back, trusted him, and backed Mark's dream of stealing the Winkelvoss' idea. I mean, realistically, Mark could have gotten this $1,000 from just about anyone. His parents are doctors, the Winkelvoss twins came from a rich family, hell, he was living at Harvard at the time. It's not exactly a beacon of poverty, but Mark chose Eduardo, and I think that speaks for itself.
I went to my friend for the money because that's who I wanted to be partners with. Eduardo was the president of the Harvard Investors Association, and he was also my best friend.
Your best friend is suing you for $600 million.
I didn't know that. Tell me more.
Before we get into that, it can't be overstated how well everything was going once Facebook actually launched. Just 2 months after release, they were in 30 schools across the US and were hoping to be in 100 by the end of the summer. But more users means they needed more servers, more employees, and of course, more money. That was a problem because the company wasn't actually producing any income at the time. And to complicate things even more, Mark had just made a major decision that he and the team were going to go to Palo Alto, California for the summer.
So we're like, all right, this is pretty sweet. Like, let's just go all out and see how many schools we can launch this at as quickly as possible. So we closed out the year with, I think, 29 schools. Came out to Palo Alto for the summer just to hang out because Palo Alto is kind of this mythical place where, you know, all the startups come from. And we're like, all right, we kind of have our own little project, so maybe that'll be a cool place to be.
That decision would go on to become the biggest point of contention in Eduardo and Mark's relationship, because Eduardo had already accepted an internship at Lehman Brothers in New York City that summer. But Mark didn't tell Eduardo about the California plan until after he accepted the internship. And Mark didn't just ask Eduardo about moving to Palo Alto, he told him.
I already found a house for rent on a street 2 blocks from the Stanford campus. It is perfect and it's got a pool.
When did you decide to go to California for the summer?
You mean when did I actually decide?
Eduardo wasn't thrilled about the move, but he still trusted Mark. They were on the same team after all. So Eduardo agreed to invest another $18,000 into the company to fund the California trip, and they decided to split up the work. Eduardo would be in New York City trying to get advertisers on Facebook to finally bring in some revenue, while Mark and the team focused on developing the site in Palo Alto. By June of 2004, Facebook had 250,000 members, and Mark and the team ended up in California in the exact situation Eduardo feared, surrounded by a bunch of VC sociopaths like Peter Thiel and tech douchebags like Sean Parker. Eduardo ended up quitting his internship on the first day and instead went right into getting crushed by advertisers for 10 hours a day on Madison Ave.
After expressing misgivings about Mr. Zuckerberg taking the company and moving it to California for the summer, why did you put $18,000 in an account for his use?
I figured we were partners. I wanted to be a team player. I figured Mark, Dustin, and the new interns could work on the site while I was generating advertiser interest in New York. But mostly I figured, how much could possibly go wrong in 3 months?
It turns out a lot can go wrong in 3 months, and to be fair, it's not all Mark's fault. Eduardo made 3 major mistakes that summer. 1, he put unauthorized ads for his new startup company on Facebook without asking or paying. 2nd, he dropped the ball on almost all the main tasks he was given. 3rd, after a continued dispute with Mark about moving to California, he made his biggest mistake yet.
You froze our account?
I did.
You froze the account.
I had to get your attention, Mark.
Do you realize that you jeopardized the entire company? Do you realize that your actions could have permanently destroyed everything I've been working on?
We have been working on.
Without money, the site can't function. Okay, let me tell you the difference between Facebook and everybody else. We don't crash ever. If the servers are down for even a day, our entire reputation is irreversibly destroyed.
Eduardo was pissed when he found out Mark and Sean Parker were taking business meetings without him because that was supposed to be his job. So was Eduardo doing a good job as CFO? No, but it's kind of hard to blame the guy when he was never really given a fair shot. A co-founder should never be cut out of major decisions like where the company operates. And regardless of who's at fault, none of Eduardo's shortcomings justified what Mark did next. Because Mark decided that Eduardo wasn't doing a very good job as CFO, he started plotting to dilute Eduardo's ownership in Facebook. How are you going to get around Eduardo? I'm going to buy the LLC and then give him less shares in the company that bought it. I'm not sure it's worth a potential lawsuit just to redistribute shares. You have nothing to gain. No, I do, because until I do this, I need to run everything by Eduardo. After this, I have control. So Mark didn't just want Eduardo out of the way, he wanted total, uncontested control of the company. Even at just 20 years old, Mark was cold, calculated, and willing to stab his own best friend in the back just to make sure no one could stand in his way. In July of 2004, Mark and the team restructured Facebook from a simple LLC into a new corporation, which gave them the power to issue more shares. They framed this to Eduardo as a way to bring in outside investors, but they forgot to mention it was also a tool specifically designed to quietly cut Eduardo out of the company.
Peter Thiel just made an angel investment of $500,000. What? They want to reincorporate the company. They want to meet you. They need your signature on some documents, so you got to get your ass on the first flight back to San Francisco. I need my CFO.
What Eduardo didn't realize was that Mark had already gone on the offensive. On September 27, 2004, Peter Thiel formally acquired 9% of the new company with a $500,000 investment. Before that deal, Eduardo owned 30% of Facebook, and after, he owned 24%. In October, Eduardo signed an agreement that gave him 3 million shares of common stock in the new corporation. Still around 24%, but buried in that agreement was a clause that handed over all of Facebook's intellectual property, and more importantly, gave Mark full control of the company. In January of 2005, Zuck had Facebook issue 9 million shares of common stock in the new corporation. He gave himself 3.3 million shares and gave the rest to others. By this point, Eduardo's stake had dropped from about 24% to below 10%. And there's no room for misunderstanding or ambiguity here. Mark did this all 100% knowingly. Is there a way to do this without making it painfully apparent to him that he's being diluted to 10%? And even Mark's scumbag lawyer basically told him this was dumb because it could open Mark up to a lawsuit due to the fact that Mark was only planning on diluting Eduardo and not anyone else. Because if you're going to dilute shares in a company, you normally have to dilute everyone proportionally. But Mark only wanted to carve out Eduardo specifically.
What was Mr. Zuckerberg's ownership share diluted down to?
It wasn't.
What was Mr. Moskowitz's ownership share diluted down to?
It wasn't.
What was Sean Parker's ownership share diluted down to?
It wasn't.
What was Peter Thiel's ownership share diluted down to?
It wasn't.
And what was your ownership share diluted down to?
0.03%.
Eduardo was never diluted down to 0.03%, that was a dramatization, but if Mark could have, he definitely would have. I mean, what would have stopped him? His integrity? At the end of the day, Mark didn't just betray a business partner here, he stabbed a friend in the back. Sure, Eduardo wasn't perfect, but his biggest mistake wasn't that he didn't move to California or the Job Oozle blunder, it was trusting a snake. Because if Mark can ice out the guy who literally helped make the creation of Facebook possible, why would he treat anyone else, specifically people he doesn't even know, not like disposable trash? Mark should be calling Eduardo every morning at 6 a.m., telling him how grateful he is for his help early on. Instead, Mark deservingly got sued by his own friend.
Partnership has always meant a lot to me, both in my personal life and in work. I want people to be on the voyage with me, right? It's like, this isn't like a solo story. That's a lot of how I derive meaning in life.
I was your only friend. Yet one friend.
Thankfully, things did work out pretty well for Eduardo at the end of the day. He sued Facebook after realizing his shares were being diluted, and in 2009, they settled out of court. Eduardo walked away with a 4 to 5% stake in the company, and today, he's the richest man in Singapore, and most importantly, not Mark Zuckerberg. However, as part of that settlement, Mark made sure that Eduardo signed a gag order, which means that Eduardo was legally barred from telling the world who Mark really is.
You only start one of these companies if you believe in giving people a voice.
So now we've gone over Facemash, Harvard Connection, and Eduardo. Let's say, hypothetically, only 1/4 of this stuff is true, and I made the rest up. This guy is still a demon. Even in his early days, the lying and backstabbing weren't accidents, they were the blueprints. Some people criticize the social network because of the inaccuracies, but honestly, the biggest inaccuracy was how much they humanized Mark. The last line in the movie was this:
"You're not an asshole, Mark. You're just trying so hard to be."
I don't think Mark has to try to be an asshole at all. I think that's just his default setting. Mark doesn't care who he lies to, steps on, or betrays as long as he gets what he wants. Sure, maybe we can chalk up all the older stuff to him just being a naive college kid. But Mark is 41 now, and he's only getting worse with time, which should be no surprise. When nothing you do ever lands you in real trouble, the outcome is guaranteed. Do whatever you want, whenever you want, to whoever you want.
If you have $1 billion, we have learned that you can do whatever you want to do. When Elon Musk wants to send things in space, he don't have to ask nobody's permission. Congress don't meet. Senate don't meet. No police department gotta be warned. He don't need a permit. None of that. If you got $1 billion, you do what you want to do, and then you tell them what you did. And that's how it goes.
Mark was untouchable before he even became a billionaire. He didn't just survive the vicious and chaotic foundation of Facebook, he turned it into one of the most powerful corporations on Earth. And that's the scariest part. Mark is not just evil, he's dangerously good at being evil, and unlike other tech CEOs, his company was structured to make him even more untouchable than he already was. There is no real comparison to Mark's level of control at Meta. At Google, Apple, even Amazon and Tesla, they have boards and executive teams that can somewhat rein in leadership. But Meta was intentionally structured so Mark calls all the shots. To put this into perspective, Elon has about 13% of the voting shares at Tesla, Bezos has about 10% at Amazon, Mark has about 60% at Meta, so his vote is the only one that really counts.
I started Facebook, I run it, and I'm responsible for what happens here.
It should be no surprise that Mark's company has gone on to become so bad that almost no one has bothered trying to document it all. Not because it's boring, but because the list of insane behavior is so extensive it would take an entire 10-part series just to summarize the highlights. But I think the fact that all of Mark's friends who helped build Facebook left by 2010 speaks volumes. Chris Hughes, gone. Dustin Moskovitz, gone. Eduardo, gone. On top of that, every founder of every major company that Meta has acquired has since left as well. Co-founders of Instagram, gone. Founder of Oculus, gone. Co-founders of WhatsApp, gone. One of them even started a hashtag called Delete Facebook. So is everyone else the problem, or is it maybe Mark? It's not like these guys are all socialists, they all love making money, and Mark is the best at making money. But even then, no one has stuck by the Zuck long term. There's a very good reason why over the years, countless people who helped build the company from the ground up started speaking out against how dangerous Mark's unchecked power has become. For example, one of Facebook's original co-founders, Chris Hughes, explicitly called for the breakup of the company in 2019. Mark's power is unprecedented and un-American. Mark alone can decide how to configure Facebook's algorithms to determine what people see in their news feeds. It is a powerful monopoly, eclipsing all of its rivals and erasing competition from the social networking category. That's only scratching the surface of what Chris said. Yet, since 2019, Mark has only gotten more powerful and more reckless, because absolute power corrupts absolutely. In history, we've seen this play out time and time again, where dictators like Stalin, Mao Zedong, and Kim Jong-il used unchecked power to prioritize self-interest over anything else. Mark obviously isn't a murderous dictator, but his influence might actually be greater than theirs ever was, because no dictator in the history of the world has ever even come close to having direct access to the attention, emotions, behaviors, and private communications of half of the entire Earth's population.
3.2 billion people use one of our services every day.
That's
Yeah, it's wild.
More than a third of the planet. That's so crazy.
Yeah, and it's
almost half of Earth.
Well, on a monthly basis, it is probably half.
This is a scope of influence that has never been seen before in human history. And this isn't just about Facebook. Mark and his company own Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and Facebook. That's not a standard corporation. That's one company led by one man, which has complete control over 4 of the biggest tools for digital communication worldwide. And the US government has finally started catching on. Meta is now facing an FTC antitrust lawsuit for operating like an illegal monopoly, and thanks to this lawsuit, a ton of internal documents were made public, so now we know exactly what Mark really thinks about competition. In 2012, back when Instagram first started blowing up, Mark sent this email considering how active they should be with acquisitions, because companies like Instagram could be disruptive to Facebook's growth. The CFO at the time responded by saying, "Are you trying to neutralize a potential competitor, acquire talent, or integrate their products with ours?" Mark says it's a combination of neutralizing competition and to integrate their products into theirs. Then he says, what we're really buying is time, which really means he wants to stall their growth, steal their ideas, and use their platform to build their own. On the exact same day Facebook officially acquired Instagram, Mark literally said, "We can likely always just buy any competitive startups." He also said, "Instagram was our threat. One thing about startups though is you can often acquire them." The case probably should have been closed right there. These emails are textbook anti-competitive behavior. Notice how they're not talking about winning through providing the most amount of value to each and every user. Instead, they're talking about beating their competition by just purchasing them.
You know, I don't see it that way, actually.
Shortly after the acquisition of Instagram in February of 2013, Mark sent out an email saying, "The biggest competitive vector for us is for some company to build out a messaging app for communicating with small groups of people and then transform that into a broader social network. This is a big risk for us." Then in February of 2014, Facebook officially acquired WhatsApp for $19 billion when they had about 500 million users, and it's now grown to become by far the largest messaging app in the world. And although I'm not a judge, if this isn't monopolistic behavior by definition, then we're living in some alternate reality where Elon Musk is poor and Mark Zuckerberg is the reason why every woman I talk to ends up lesbian. But if I had to bet on it, Meta is not going to face any sort of meaningful consequences for this monopoly stuff. They spend tens of millions of dollars every year lobbying both sides of the US government, which basically guarantees they don't face any real regulation. They might get fined every now and then, but that stuff is mostly just for show.
Like, at least the US has the rule of law, right? So the government can come after you for something, but you still get your day in court, and the courts are pretty fair.
Yeah, the rule of law only applies to the people who don't cut million-dollar checks to the president's inauguration fund. I hate to be conspiratorial here, but I don't think Mark and his company donate tens of millions of dollars every year to the government out of the kindness of their hearts. And just using common sense, how can we expect any politician to effectively regulate the same people that their party is openly accepting money from? If the people writing the laws are getting paid by the people who don't want the laws, then of course nothing meaningful is going to get passed. This corruption has gone so far that the United States, the alleged leader of the free world, still hasn't passed any federal data privacy legislation as of 2025. All we have are a few narrow rules and a patchwork of state laws. That is inexcusable no matter how you cut it. So big tech companies like Meta aren't just dodging accountability, they're actively purchasing bipartisan negligence, which allows them to stay above the law.
You could get a lot more done if the government were helping American companies rather than kind of slowing you down at every step along the way.
But Meta's corruption doesn't stop at just lobbying. They also spend millions of dollars trying to censor those who speak out against them, whether it's indirectly through illegal NDAs or directly like they recently tried to do to Sarah Wynn Williams, Meta's former director of public policy. Sarah documented her experience working at Meta in her book, Careless People, a cautionary tale of power, greed, and lost idealism. When the book was released on March 11th, 2025, Meta immediately hit Sarah with a legal gag order, but trying to silence critics in a country with free speech typically isn't a very effective strategy, so in this case, it was actually just free marketing. The next day, a Meta spokesperson then falsely accused Sarah's book of being false and defamatory without bothering to provide any evidence as to what exactly was defamatory or false, so basically just anyone who dislikes me is defaming me and lying. But I honestly can't even blame Mark for trying so hard to censor Sarah, because some of the stuff she reveals in her book is way worse than I could have ever imagined, even from Zuck and company. For example, she claims that Meta employees used to let Mark intentionally win in board games, which I won't lie, actually makes sense. If I was a billionaire, I'd definitely just force people to let me win all the time. Sarah also shares some other wild stories, like how Meta's COO at the time, Sheryl Sandberg, allegedly invited Sarah to come to bed while on a private jet. Later, Sheryl apparently asked another female employee to purchase $13,000 worth of lingerie for the both of them, which is backed up with actual email receipts. Not only is this wildly inappropriate for a professional environment, it's also just trash riz. Sarah also accused her boss at the time, Joel Kaplan, of harassment, saying he pushed her for weekly video calls while she was still on maternity leave and recovering from some pretty serious birth complications. Here, Sarah describes a video call she had with Joel where he was allegedly lying in bed and pressing her for sensitive medical information that would have forced her to get uncomfortably personal. In another conversation with Joel after Sarah got back from maternity leave, he apparently told her she wasn't responsive enough while she was in a coma after giving birth. Pretty nasty stuff if true, and while I do trust Sarah a lot after reading her book and seeing her interviews, at the end of the day, we weren't in these rooms, so only the people involved know what actually happened and what didn't. However, the most damning and 100% provable thing that Sarah brought to light in her book was Facebook's deep involvement with the Chinese Communist Party.
One thing the Chinese Communist Party and Mark Zuckerberg share is that they want to silence their critics. I can say that from a personal experience. So I think they came to the right man.
For context, both Instagram and Facebook used to be allowed in China, but Facebook was banned in 2009 and Instagram was banned in 2014. Once these bans hit, Mark wasn't about to just walk away. He launched a years-long campaign to get back into China. The problem is, China is essentially an authoritarian surveillance state, so any form of social media there needs to be heavily censored on the CCP's behalf. And in theory, following a country's rules makes sense if you want to operate there. We can't expect every country to share our values, and Meta wants to make more money, so it does make sense that they wanted access to that market. But Mark didn't just follow the rules. He got used like a rag doll by the CCP. First of all, he learned Mandarin just to prove to Xi Jinping how obedient he is. Look, Mandarin is a beautiful language. Chinese people and culture are amazing. I love Bruce Lee, Yao Ming, and the Higher Brothers just as much as the next guy. But let's be honest here, Mark doesn't care about any of that. He doesn't even care about America. Mark learned Mandarin to show the CCP what a good boy he is. I say that because he even went as far as posting this propaganda photo of himself jogging on the streets of Tiananmen Square. These are the exact same streets where hundreds of protesters were crushed by an armed militia and tanks in June of 1989 for the crime of being pro-democracy. And if you thought Zuck couldn't get any more cucked, he also endorsed Xi Jinping's official propaganda book, The Governance of China, and specifically said in his review, "I've bought copies of this book for my colleagues as well. I want them to understand socialism with Chinese characteristics." But look, these were just one-off events. Sometimes you accidentally bootlick an authoritarian regime. It happens to the best of us. However, in Sarah's book, Careless People, she details an internal meta project called Project Aldrin. And this is where we start to see the real reason why Meta wanted to silence her so badly. I'm curious, why would China allow Facebook in? I soon find a set of documents that set out Facebook's pitch. The first is titled China, Our Value Proposition. The key offer is that Facebook will help China promote safe and secure social order. And what does this mean? Surveillance. They point out that on Facebook, the profiles represent real people with their real names, and that we adhere to local laws wherever we operate and develop close relationships with law enforcement and governments. That's insane, obviously, but maybe this is just speculation, right? Mark would never. He's way too ethical. No. In order to win access to the Chinese market, Facebook did everything they possibly could to show the CCP that they would happily be a part of their inhumane surveillance machine. In these internal messages from 2017, Facebook employees are planning Phase 0 of their censorship plan in China. Their idea was to identify all of the content already blocked by the CCP and block it themselves. Phase 1 was to start censoring foreign visitors, first in one city, then expanding province by province. Another Meta employee calls this a good way to build trust, and some other moron responds by saying, "Great stuff, guys, let's do it."
All of this, let's be clear, for a murderous regime in China, the most barbaric, most evil regime on the face of the planet, and our free speech champion, Mark Zuckerberg, is here with his team of engineers actively working to make Facebook censor on their behalf.
Even Facebook themselves acknowledge that what Senator Josh Hawley just said is true. In an internal memo, they mentioned that one of the cons of Facebook being in China was Facebook employees will be responsible for user data responses that could lead to death, torture, and incarceration. Sarah points out how Joel Kaplan then edited this text and replaced it with, Facebook employees will be responsible for directly responding to requests for data from a government that does not respect international standards for human rights. Still pretty damn bad if you ask me, but clearly Facebook and Mark did not care. They start building new censorship tools. I find detailed content moderation and censorship tools like an emergency switch to block any specific region in China from interacting with Chinese and non-Chinese users. Also, an extreme emergency content switch to remove viral content originating inside or outside China during times of potential unrest, including significant anniversaries, like the June 4th anniversary of Tiananmen Square. This is one of those things where the more you look into it, the worse it gets. When Sarah testified at the Senate Judiciary Committee earlier this year, she specifically mentioned this.
As part of the censorship tool that was developed, there were virality counters. So anytime a piece of content got over 10,000 views, that would automatically trigger it being reviewed by what they called the chief editor. What was particularly surprising is that the virality counters were not just installed, but activated in Hong Kong and also in Taiwan.
So Meta didn't just build these censorship tools, they apparently tested them on their own platforms and their own users outside of mainland China as a demo for the CCP. And it doesn't stop there. In this internal email from Facebook's privacy team, they mention how there was a potential complication with the negotiations with the CCP. To solve this, Facebook agrees to grant the Chinese government access to Chinese users' data, including people from Hong Kong. I don't even need to expand on why this is so bad, because I think Mark himself explained it way better than I ever could.
At some level, these questions around data and how it's used and whether authoritarian governments get access to it, I think are even more sensitive because if you can't say something that you want, that is highly problematic. That violates your human rights, I think, in a lot of cases. It stops progress. If a government can get access to your data, then it can identify who you are and go lock you up and hurt you and hurt your family and cause real physical harm in ways that are just really deep.
Mark shouldn't even be in jail for offering user data to the CCP, but for the hypocrisy. I can live with the fact that he's pro-CCP, that's his opinion, but I just can't live with the fact that he said those words after his company offered user data to the Chinese government in writing. And if that wasn't bad enough, in 2014, a Chinese billionaire named Guo Wengui was essentially exiled from China after being accused of a bunch of crimes. Once he came to the US, he started speaking out against the CCP. According to this email from one of Mark's employees, a Chinese official named Zhao asked whether Facebook could classify content from Guo's page as fake news, and whether or not they'd remove it if someone filed a complaint. The employee lays out 3 response options for how Facebook could handle this, including one that literally says, we can do even more than expected. I don't even know what that means in this context. Were they planning to kill the guy or something? That sounds like something Tony Soprano would say. Thankfully, they didn't go that far. They settled for option 2. Guo was banned on Facebook that same year. Then, in 2018, Facebook's general counsel at the time testified under oath that pressure from the Chinese government had nothing to do with the ban.
Was this truthful testimony, Ms. Williams?
No, Senator.
It's in fact an outright lie, is it not?
It is, Senator.
We just saw the documentation. Facebook received not just a request, Facebook received direct pressure from the Chinese Communist Party and bowed to it and discussed it internally and planned it and then lied about it to Congress.
Just to clarify this, everything we've gone over so far regarding Facebook and China is just a small glimpse behind the curtain. Sarah filed a 78-page whistleblower complaint with the SEC in April of 2024, and although those documents haven't been released publicly, they were reviewed and reported on by the Washington Post in this article here. And of course, Sarah's book, Careless People, goes way deeper into certain things, like how Facebook considered storing user data inside of China, including data on servers servers that Chinese authorities could access under their laws. But I think we all get the point by now. Mark and his company tried everything they possibly could to bend over backwards for the CCP, and they were apparently so good at being pro-CCP that in 2016, China's propaganda chief at the time, Li Yuanshan, commended Mark for his cooperative attitude towards Chinese regulation and specifically said he hopes Facebook can strengthen exchanges and improve mutual understanding with China's internet companies.
While Mark Zuckerberg now claims to be a champion of the United States and claims to be a free speech warrior, he in fact worked hand in glove with the Chinese Communist Party for years. He, in fact, made censorship his business model. He, in fact, developed censorship tools for the Chinese Communist Party to use against its own people. He, in fact, made Americans' own user data available, was willing to make it available to Beijing. The truth is, Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg have lied to the American people repeatedly.
Unfortunately for Mark, his social credit score just wasn't high enough, so Facebook and Instagram still haven't been unbanned in China to this day. And now, in one of the greatest attempts at revisionist history ever, Mark tries to act like it was his choice all along. In a 2019 speech at Georgetown University, he tried to paint this situation like he turned them down on moral grounds.
I wanted our services in China because I believe in connecting the whole world, and I thought, maybe we could help create a more open society. And this is something that I worked hard on for a long time, but we could never come to agreement on what it would take for us to operate there, and they never let us in. Now, we have more freedom to speak out and stand up for the values that we believe in and fight for free expression around the world.
This is literally the middle-aged version of, well, I didn't want to go to that party anyways. Except in this case, he spent half a decade begging for an invite first. It's just such a disrespectful way to frame things. The fact that Meta's platforms don't operate in China has nothing to do with freedom of expression or values. They literally launched a social media app called Colorful Balloons in China, and although the app flopped, Meta made $18 billion in revenue from China in 2024 through Chinese companies buying ads on Facebook to target users outside of China. So how does this man have the audacity to lecture the world about digital freedom of speech when we have undeniable evidence of him working hand in glove with the largest, most oppressive censorship regime in the history of humanity? And it's not just the fact that Mark tried to expand his company into China that makes this so bad. The biggest issue here is that someone as rich and powerful as Mark is so blinded by profit and growth that he loses all common sense. Ethics aside, even if all of Mark's bootlicking worked perfectly and Facebook did get approved in China, the CCP would have him on a leash. One of the biggest problems with foreign companies working under totalitarian regimes is that they can just change the rules about what is and isn't acceptable at any time with zero oversight. 10 years down the line, Xi Jinping could literally tell Mark to fly to Beijing just to shine his shoes, and Mark would have no choice but to say yes, because the moment he disobeys, access to 1.5 billion users gone and years of work wasted. So even if this worked, his company would be stuck in a permanently compromised position. China does not need Facebook. They're doing just fine without it, but Facebook would need China to justify all the time and money they blew trying to get in. So by trying to run these alleged free speech platforms in China, he would essentially be signing up to become a slave to his own country's greatest adversary.
Look, the greatest trick Mark Zuckerberg ever pulled was wrapping the American flag around himself and calling himself a patriot and saying he didn't offer services in China while he spent the last decade building an $18 billion business there.
And he wrapped the flag around himself even as he disclosed sensitive technologies that enabled the Chinese to gain the upper hand on surveilling its citizens, but also the upper hand in engaging with us.
And he continues to wrap the flag around himself as we move into the next era of artificial intelligence.
This isn't just about foreign policy or business ethics, it's about who has the keys to the digital kingdom. No singular individual should have as much power as Mark has, and in that regard, Mark genuinely scares me. Not in the traditional sense, he can't even bench 225 for reps, but when someone this malicious, this short-sighted, and this powerful is in full control of the platforms that decide what we see, what we say, and who gets heard, that is a recipe for disaster.
I just think we care more. We're the company that cares about helping people connect. Most other technology companies are basically out there trying to design new ways for people to use technology. We're out there trying to design technology to create new ways for people to interact with other people.
It's this deep belief that you're trying to make a change, you're trying to connect people in the world. And I really do believe that if you do something good and if you help people out, then eventually some portion of that good will come back to you.
When we think of evil companies, we might think of oil tycoons, big tobacco, casinos, United Healthcare, or car dealerships with Armenian sales managers. However, tech companies like Meta often get overlooked, even though they're just as bad, if not worse, than all the businesses I just mentioned. And Mark? He's just as much of a gremlin as the guys who dump used motor oil into a whale's nose for an extra 2% profit margin. The main difference is Mark and his company are able to pretend like they're not as bad because at face value, their product looks innocent. Because social media at its core is a great thing. We all crave connection, everyone loves good media, and I think social media used to effectively combine those ideas. As an early user of both Instagram and Facebook myself, I'd be the first to admit that I used to love logging in and seeing that my 6th drunk DM from 2 AM last night was left on read, or that one of my friends posted a picture of them holding a fish they just killed by sticking a hook in its mouth. Don't get me wrong, the apps were never perfect, but it was a truly beautiful experience using these apps back in the day, because they used to genuinely prioritize connection by showing you whatever your friends posted in a chronological order. Users had full control of what they consumed because they could choose to follow whoever they knew or wanted to get to know, and unfollow someone the second they stopped liking them. But that all started to change in 2011, when Facebook began slowly shifting away from the chronological feed towards an algorithmic feed that just shows you whatever keeps you scrolling, even if you never followed that person or page. By 2015, the chronological feed was completely buried out of sight. Instagram switched from a chronological feed to an algorithmic feed in 2016, and this shift from chronological to algorithmic feeds marked the beginning of social media transforming into media. Social media was about connecting with people through media. Media, in Meta's case, is about showing users passively consumed, optimized slop that's fed to you by a machine.
We're basically shifting from having most of the content that you see in Facebook and Instagram come from your friend or follow graph to now over time, having more and more of that content just come from AI recommendation.
To put it bluntly, these algorithm changes fundamentally destroyed the initial purpose of these apps. I did not sign up for Facebook or Instagram to use an algorithm that shows me videos of some weird nerd eating plain toast in a deranged way. I signed up for social media to connect more with people I actually know and to form new connections. There's a big difference between those two things. One is a good way to keep up with people, the other is an attempt at getting you addicted to a screen. Unfortunately, this strategy is working pretty damn well. This massive study was published on science.org in 2023, where 20 researchers partnered directly with Meta and tested the differences between how people used an algorithmic feed versus a chronological feed. And the results were crystal clear. The test subjects who used the algorithmic feed on Facebook spent 73% more time than the average US user, and those using a chronological feed only spent 37% more time than the average US user. So even though the people in this study were heavier users of social media in general, the people who used the algorithmic feeds still spent significantly more time than the chronological users. Worst of all, Mark knows for a fact that this algorithm shift isn't what people actually want. According to Meta's own internal research, when they asked teenage Instagram users going through hard times what would actually help them, the top response was that users wanted more control over what they saw in their feeds. The second most common answer was more connection with people going through similar experiences. So Instagram users don't want more engagement, they want more control and more connections. Chronological feeds certainly aren't perfect, but they do fix both of those issues. But instead of listening to their users, Meta did the exact opposite. They buried the chronological feeds and pushed everyone onto algorithms that are specifically designed to maximize their personal interests. If I'm being honest, I think this algorithm shift was the largest bait and switch in the history of humanity. Billions of people got forced into a fundamental product change without their permission, they were given no option to switch back at the time, and Meta didn't even bother letting users know exactly when these changes were coming. They just woke up one day and it was a completely different app.
It's never consensual if you surprise somebody.
Nearly a decade later, these apps barely function as tools for real connection anymore. Remember the antitrust hearing stats I mentioned earlier? 22% of content on Facebook was from friends, 11% on IG in 2023. Those numbers went down to 17% and 7% as of 2025. So how much lower do the numbers have to go before we officially remove the social from social media? The numbers literally can't be that much lower before they become negative numbers. You're about to start losing connection by going on IG.
I don't know, it kind of like throughout the just sort of, I don't know how this stuff works.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Anyways, these numbers probably used to be 80, 90, 100%, but because Facebook and Instagram have made a conscious effort to stop prioritizing connection, naturally, a lot of people started posting less over time. A picture of you and your friend at the bar shot on an iPhone 8 doesn't maximize engagement metrics, so of course, any algorithm will show that less compared to professionally made creator content. And there's no point in posting if your posts aren't being shown to your friends. And as Mark himself once said,
a social product isn't that useful if you're not connected to other people when you're using it.
That begs the question, why'd he make these changes anyways? If we check out this 10K form that Meta filed with the SEC in 2024, which Mark personally signed off on, it says, "Our financial performance has been and will continue to be significantly determined by our success in adding, retaining, and engaging active users. If our users decrease their level of engagement with our products, our revenue and financial results in business may be significantly harmed." In other words, Meta doesn't just prefer engagement over connection, they're financially dependent on it, because surface level consumption is way more profitable in the short term compared to genuine connection, and Meta is legally bound to chase endless profits even if it comes at the cost of human well-being. That is a major conflict of interest. And the most evil part about all of this isn't even the fiduciary responsibility that Mark has to his shareholders or the bait and switch. It's the fact that even Mark himself acknowledges that the algorithm shift wasn't in the best interests of his users.
Everything that you're doing on a computer or screen isn't the same. There's a lot of research into well-being that shows that there's are you actively engaging, and are you engaging with a person? Are you building relationships, or are you just consuming? If you're building a relationship, then that is associated typically with a lot of long-term benefits and well-being, right? Because the relationships that we have in our lives, I view that as the meaning, right? That's that to me is the point, and that I think over time is what generally creates happiness for people and prosperity. But if you're just sitting there and consuming stuff, it's not necessarily bad, but it generally isn't associated with all the positive benefits that you get from being actively engaged or building relationships.
So Mark fully understands that connecting is superior to consuming, but he chose to systemically make the apps he owns less about connecting and more about consuming. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know how Mark isn't in Guantanamo Bay right this second. When your greed manifests itself in a way that negatively impacts the lives of billions, by your own admission, it's past greed. It's inhumane.
I think Mark Zuckerberg should be strung up and killed. to be honest.
Do you think it's Zucker straight up?
Yeah, I think he should at least be put on an island, stripped of every piece of control he has over our lives.
Maybe that's too far, but we should probably excommunicate him from American society, because what happens when he's here is straight up catastrophic. A 2019 internal Facebook survey found that 1 out of every 8 users reported that they use the platform so excessively that it negatively impacts their sleep, parenting, or relationships. Think about how insane that is. If you ran a pizza place where 1 out of every 8 customers reported actual harm, like food poisoning or allergic reactions, you would be shut down within days. But when it's social media, we don't even think about it twice. So this isn't just about some fringe group of addicts. Almost every adult in the country is using these addiction-based apps daily. The average American adult user spends 31 minutes a day on Facebook. That number is about 33 minutes per day on Instagram. And it gets even worse when you break it down by age. The average 55 to 64-year-old uses Facebook about 45 minutes a day, and the average 18 through 24-year-old uses Instagram 53 minutes a day. So Facebook has the old heads, Instagram has the young pups, and the people outside the target demographics are bringing the numbers down. Even if we round those numbers down to just 1 hour per day combined, that's 7 hours per week. Over a full year, that's about 365 hours. That's more than 15 full days per year spent scrolling through content chosen by an algorithm on Facebook and Instagram. Let me ask you this: if Mark told you up front, hey, download these apps, you'll spend 15 days a year on them. We promise connection, but 80% or more of your time is going to be spent consuming algorithmic content from strangers. And there's a 1 in 8 chance it'll wreck your sleep, parenting, or relationships. Would you say yes?
No, of course not.
And Meta knows that. So they have to lie, and by the time you realize what's happening, you're already hooked. Don't get me wrong, not every minute of life needs to be purely productive. 1 hour a day of entertainment is no problem at all. The problem is that the hour most people spend on IG or Facebook isn't natural usage. It's engineered engagement that turns attention into currency and the user into the product. Let's blame anything except social media for the fact that attention spans have completely collapsed in the 21st century, and ignore the fact that the percentage of adults who've read a book in the past year has dropped from 72% in 2015 to 54% in 2023. It's not just about the quantity of time, it's what happens in that time using these apps. Using an extremely conservative estimate, let's say you view 5 stories, reels, and posts per minute on Facebook and Instagram. If you use these apps for 1 hour a day, that's 300 separate pieces of media in an hour. Is that not an abnormal level of stimulation? It should be no surprise that a recent Swinburne University study found that after just 3 minutes of scrolling, social media use was associated with lower self-reported focus, and in the same setup, TV and gaming were associated with an increased focus. And that makes sense. If you're watching TV or playing a video game, you're watching or playing 1, 2, 3 pieces of media in a singular hour at most, not 300 that are only showing up because an algorithm has decided that's what's best to hijack your attention at that moment in time. So the problem isn't just the hour, it's that the mind is being yanked in hundreds of different directions in that hour. And when the dealer controlling the supply is chasing endless consumption, the result isn't scarcity, it's sensory overload.
All our diseases are diseases of abundance, not diseases of scarcity, right? Old times I may have starved. Old times if I got sugar, that was a wonderful thing. I should have eaten all the sugar to get my hands on. If I'd gotten a piece of news or gossip, that was interesting data. That would have helped my life and moved me forward. If I'd gotten some brief amount of entertainment, whether through video games or magazines or whatever, that would have been good. Now it's all diseases of abundance. We are overexposed to everything. So the way to survive in modern society is to be an ascetic. It is to retreat from society. There's too much society everywhere you go. Society in your phone, society in your pocket, society in your ears. You're being socialized right now by listening to this podcast.
Right.
We're socializing you. We're programming you. Everyone's trying to program everybody. The only solution is turn it off.
I don't blame or judge anyone for using these platforms. They're fun to use, and both Mark and Meta are damn good at what they do. But that's kind of the issue. Meta is amazing at engineering their platforms to hijack human attention. And it works because there isn't one specific exploitative feature that people can point to and speak out against. Meta uses a million different small design choices that individually aren't really that big of a deal, but Meta doesn't use any of them in isolation. They stack every manipulative design trick in the book to trap users into what's known as a dopamine-driven feedback loop. For example, the algorithm is designed to offer what's called variable rewards, so you open the app not knowing what you'll see, and that unpredictability is what keeps people coming back. Infinite scroll removes natural stopping points, so it's easier to keep scrolling and lose track of time. Plus, makes it so you don't even have to think about leaving the app. Autoplay forces passive consumption by deciding what you're gonna watch before you even realize you're watching it. Push notifications are a psyop. You really don't need to be notified of every little thing that happens on an app. If something was that important, you'd get a phone call, a text, or an email. But Facebook and Instagram will constantly send you notifications for even the most irrelevant things in an attempt to create a compulsive checking habit. Likes, shares, and comments are another psyop. If you're not producing income off of these metrics, they're essentially just cheap external validations. These numbers train users to crave attention, tie their self-worth to that attention, and feel anxious when they don't get enough. Stories are ephemeral content which disappear after 24 hours. The problem is, almost none of the content in most stories is actually time sensitive, so it doesn't actually need to disappear, but it's designed that way to keep people checking the app to exploit their fear of missing out. Meta also tracks basically everything you do on their platforms, like how long you pause on a post, what you click on, whose page you go on but don't follow, and even how fast you scroll. Almost every micro behavior gets logged and fed into the algorithm. What I've mentioned isn't even close to the full extent of what Meta does to get people addicted. That's just the surface level stuff, but even the surface level tells us everything we need to know. These platforms have been designed with the sole purpose of getting people addicted. And that's not just speculation. Sean Parker, Facebook's former president, admitted it himself.
How do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible? And that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you, more likes and comments. I mean, it's a social validation feedback loop. It's exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. The inventors, creators, it's me, it's Mark, it's Kevin Systerman, Instagram, it's all of these people, understood this consciously, and we did it anyway.
But the features are just the fuel. The algorithm is the engine. And the problem isn't that algorithms are inherently bad. YouTube uses an algorithm, and I love watching YouTube, but YouTube is an entertainment platform, and at the very least, you get to choose what you want to watch by clicking on it. Facebook and Instagram are fundamentally different because they use exploitative algorithms on platforms that were originally supposed to facilitate connection, and you're forced to view whatever the algorithm has decided is best for you at that moment. And when you combine that with the fact that Meta is a bad company run by bad people, of course, their algorithm is going to be built to exploit the user, not help them. Again, they admitted this themselves. In a 2018 internal presentation reported by the Wall Street Journal, Facebook's integrity team said, "Our algorithms exploit the human brain's attraction to divisiveness. If left unchecked," it warned, Facebook would feed users more and more divisive content in an effort to gain user attention and increase time on the platform. Why is that the case? Anger, outrage, insecurity all get amplified on a mass scale because Meta's own internal research has proven time and time again that content that drives strong emotional reactions produces more engagement. So whether it's Andrew Tate yelling at a camera about women at the age of 38 just because he couldn't get laid in high school, endless debates about trans, hot takes about how tap water turns you gay, or beauty content that drives body image issues and eating disorders, Meta's going to show whatever benefits themselves the most. Although not everyone's feed looks like that, Harm is undeniably what the algorithm amplifies at scale, because Meta does not care about the consequences of what they show as long as it keeps people online. Here's some internal research with answers from Meta's own customers. Teens who struggle with mental health say Instagram makes it worse. Young people are acutely aware that Instagram can be bad for their mental health, yet are compelled to spend time on the app for fear of missing out on cultural and social trends. Here's another one. We make body image issues worse for 1 in 3 teen girls. And again, this research is totally consistent with how the platforms are designed to behave. Reward harmful content with the most reach. At one point, Facebook literally gave 5 times more algorithmic weight to angry emoji reactions in comparison to likes. So if your post made people angry, it went viral on purpose. But I'm not an expert on this stuff, so let's check out what the former Facebook director of monetization, Tim Kendall, had to say about their algorithms.
I just don't trust the algorithm. I don't think the algorithm is working in our best interest as an individual or a society, because the algorithm wants us to be fractured. It wants us to be polarized, not because it has a personality or an opinion, but because it is designed to get me to spend more time each and every day. And the way that it gets you to do that, and me to do that, if we're on opposite sides of the political spectrum, is it reinforces our worldview and actually slowly and gradually and imperceptibly pulls us apart.
Mark would say Tim has no idea what he's talking about, but I know for a fact that Mark wants every single one of his users to be as addicted as possible, because when a man named Lewis Barclay tried to help people be less addicted to these platforms, Meta did everything in their power to silence him. Lewis created a free browser extension called Unfollow Everything, which allowed Facebook users to automatically unfollow all their friends, groups, and pages. By unfollowing everything, this extension made it so people could manually curate their feeds by refollowing only the people and pages they actually wanted to see on their feeds. It was a nice, free thing that Lewis made for people who felt they were spending too much time on the site looking at BS. What Lewis didn't take into account is that Mark doesn't like when his users are in control of what they see on his platforms. So Facebook sent Lewis a cease and desist letter and permanently banned all of his accounts, all because he committed the crime of trying to help people not be addicted to Facebook. So Meta hates their own users so much they're willing to ban and threaten a man with legal action because he made a free browser extension that didn't hack the site, didn't break any laws, and didn't hurt anyone besides Zuck's bottom line.
Mr. Zuckerberg, do you believe your product can be addictive?
Senator, we certainly do not design the product in that way. We design the product to be as useful and meaningful as possible.
That's not my question. My question is that there seems to be an ample body of growing medical evidence that social media sites have an addictive nature to them. Do you agree with that?
Senator, I don't think the research has been conclusive.
At a certain point, there's no reason for this guy to even say words. He's just lying, flat out. There's no ambiguity, no misunderstanding, it's just straight up scripted corporate gaslighting. But I can't stress this enough, Facebook and Instagram aren't all bad. If they were, they'd have 0 users. These apps do provide some value to people, specifically when used in moderation. There's still moments of genuine connection. You can message your aunt, reconnect with an old friend, look at cute dogs, watch a funny video, or post a cool picture. That stuff is all great. But none of that changes the fact that 1, these platforms are falsely advertised still to this day, according to Mark's own words, and without mainstream pushback, the connection aspect is only going to keep getting worse over time. Number 2, these platforms are designed to be addictive. So regardless of whether any individual is addicted or not, if the product you're selling is intentionally built to turn each customer into an addict, that is a predatory product 100% of the time. With that being said, let's take a look at what the former Facebook Vice President of Growth, Chamath Palihapitiya, had to say about modern social media.
The short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops that we have created are destroying how society works. No civil discourse, no cooperation, misinformation, mistruth, and it's not an American problem. This is not about Russian ads. This is a global problem. It is eroding the core foundations of how people behave by and between each other. And I don't have a good solution. My solution is I just don't use these tools anymore. I haven't for years.
So now we've heard 3 former high-level Meta executives essentially saying the same thing. The product is toxic by design. Yet, Mark's response wasn't to fix any of the issues we just discussed. Instead, his company doubled down with an even more addictive format. Reels. Meta loves short-form content because ever since TikTok started really blowing up in 2020, they've been trying desperately to copy TikTok by jamming short-form content into every crevice of everyone's feeds, while giving users no real option to remove them. And it's working. In 2022, Meta disclosed that 20% of the time users spend on Instagram was on Reels, and by 2024, that number exploded up to 50%. But for a company that claims to care about their users, I find this to be quite shocking because almost every study on the effects of short-form content says basically the same thing. Not only is short-form content not good for you, it's actively bad for your brain. In fact, it's so bad that even the scientists are getting fried. In this study, they literally use the term TikTok brain on numerous occasions. That's how cooked we are. Essentially, what the research says is that watching too much short-form content weakens the parts of your brain responsible for focus and self-control, and instead, the brain starts to lean more on the reactive part, which is built for quick hits of instant gratification. So the more short-form videos a user watches, the harder it gets to stay focused, think clearly, or even just sit in silence without grabbing your phone. But you don't even need a research paper to prove this. Even if we use no research, I think it's totally fair to say that if someone is constantly watching short-form content, which is specifically designed for quick, mindless consumption over an extended period of time, that person is going to end up with a physically damaged brain.
Most people know a teen or preteen that literally can just sit there for hours. So what happens when you're just scrolling and you just can't stop?
Yeah, so what happens is we're starting to see an increase in ADHD. You're less likely to be able to focus, have longer periods of attention and concentration. Reading seems boring. Even watching a movie, they say, is starting to seem boring to kids because it's just too long. They don't have the attention span for it.
What makes this even worse is that just 2 years before turning Facebook and Instagram into short-form video machines, Mark posted on Facebook that the platform was moving away from passive video consumption because he admitted that it was bad for people. Yet, as soon as TikTok blew up, all that got flushed down the toilet, and now the most harmful type of passive video consumption is half of their platforms. So once again, Meta doesn't care about what's best for the user, they're pushing whatever keeps people hooked, even if it's the exact type of content they previously admitted was harmful.
I didn't understand. I never understood. I didn't know. I didn't understand. I never.
Wow, this band doesn't know shit.
By now, I think we all understand Meta isn't exactly the best company, right? And that brings us to maybe the darkest part about all of this. The real product that Mark is selling isn't actually connection, it's distraction. It's instant gratification that requires zero effort that slowly turns you into a loser if the product works as intended. You don't have to work hard to watch your 67th Instagram reel of the day, and the easier that is, the easier it is to avoid doing the harder, more meaningful stuff, like building strong connections, for example. Whether it's romantic relationships or friendships, people are inherently flawed, and as a result of that, so are the relationships. There's fights, disagreements, backstabbing. It's not easy. But on the other hand, relationships are arguably the most meaningful part of being alive.
It's the relationships that we have and the friendships that kind of bring the most happiness and in our lives, and at some level end up even correlating with living a longer and healthier life, because that kind of
grounding that you have in community ends up being important for that.
But Meta isn't in the business of helping you build anything meaningful. They're in the business of selling easy hits of dopamine that cost you nothing up front and everything in the long run. And the effects of that show up everywhere. For example, a 2023 poll by Date Psychology showed that about half of single men have not approached a woman in person in the past year. There's a lot of possible explanations for why that's the case, but the biggest one, in my opinion, would be the fact that it's 100 times easier and cheaper to sit at home on a Saturday night and watch random Instagram reels than it is to go out and maybe not have fun and maybe get rejected face to face. So this isn't just about screen time versus boredom. It's about the fact that excessive screen time makes complacency easy. Bad screen time is time not spent on relationships, goals, skills, or even the best possible entertainment. Even low daily usage, if it's mindless and compulsive, is not ideal because it conditions people to seek dopamine instead of depth, because depth is much more difficult. Just imagine if every person on Earth replaced half the time they spend scrolling IG and Facebook, calling a friend, or hanging out. The world would be 10 times more connected. Instead, billions of people are scrolling aimlessly, and Mark is cashing in on every second of it.
The number of Americans who say that they don't have a single close friend.
Yeah.
That share has jumped
really
from 3% to 12% in the last 30 years. It feels to me like with all the tools that we've built for human connection, we're struggling to connect. And I'm curious, why do you think that's happening?
I mean, there's a lot going on to unpack there. A lot has changed sort of economically and socially during that period, and a lot of those trends go back before a lot of the modern technology.
Mark gets asked a similar question in almost every interview, and every time he manages to blame someone else. Oh, the economy, it's systemic, it started before us, COVID. Okay, well, stop going on podcasts and go fix it then. His company's entire pitch is based on bringing people closer together, but almost every stat about connection indicates a downward trend since the inception of this allegedly connection-based company. The US Surgeon General said in 2023, recent surveys have found that approximately half of US adults report experiencing loneliness, with some of the highest rates among young adults. These estimates and multiple other studies indicate that loneliness and isolation are more widespread than smoking, diabetes, and obesity, with comparable levels of risk to health and premature death. So why does one of the only companies that claims to be focused on connection not deserve more blame for the clear, undeniable, systemic collapse of connection? And it's not just about one quote or one study. Basically every study that's not big tech disinformation shows the same thing. The more people use apps like Facebook and Instagram, the lonelier they tend to get. And although correlation isn't causation, in this case, I think it's fair to say that Meta's platforms, when used as intended, are not solving the loneliness issue, they're fueling it.
Whenever you're talking about building digital types of connection, one of the first questions that you get is that going to replace the physical connection? And my answer to that, especially in the case of something like this, is that no, because people already don't have as much connection as they would like to have. It's not like this is replacing some sort of better physical connection that they would have otherwise had. It's that the average person would like to have 10 friends and they have 2. Right, or 3.
Absolutely, there's nothing wrong with digital connections supplementing the physical, but the physical under Mark's leadership has only gone down. Partially, external factors do play a role in that. Sure, but no one individual has even 1/4 as much control over how human connection plays out than Mark Zuckerberg. He is the only person on the entire planet who can flip a switch and start prioritizing real connection over engagement for half of the Earth, but he chooses not to.
What is the goal? I mean, are we trying to connect people so ultimately they will leave the screens and go and play football or pick up garbage? Or are we trying to keep them as long as possible on the screens? And there is conflict of interest there. I mean, you could have, one model would be we want people to stay as little as possible online. We just need them to stay there the shortest time necessary to form the connection, which they will then go and do something in the outside world.
Yeah.
And that's one of the key questions, I think.
Mark will never be able to answer that question honestly, because Mark makes less money the more people go outside and do real things in the real world. That means he has a direct incentive to not look out for the best interests of his users. Mark couldn't possibly care less about whether or not people experience the true beauties of life, like climbing a mountaintop, getting wasted at the bar, becoming a chess grandmaster, playing the harmonica, going to the woods with your boys and skinning a moose with a spoon.
That's destiny, that's will, that's striving, that's being a trailblazer and explorer, going into space, mathematics, quantum mechanics, the secrets of the universe. It's all there. Life is fiery with its beauty. It's incredible detail. Tuning into it. They want to shatter your mind talking about Justin Bieber. It's pure evil!
Zuck wants you stuck on a couch, feeding him your attention, all while he's either working or outside living his best life, not actually using the products that he sells.
Do you limit your social media use? How do you do it?
Me personally, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just doing so many things that in practice there aren't
You
as
don't
many
have
hours in the day.
time.
But and my kids, I haven't had to think about it quite as much yet because they're pretty young.
Mark has better stuff to do than look at his 14th BBL IG model of the day. His kids don't use it, but you should use his addiction machine. Imagine if I owned a cigarette company and said, I don't smoke these, I got better stuff to do. And my kids are also too young to even touch the stuff. We'd all agree that's probably because the product is objectively harmful, right? But when it's social media, somehow this is normal. However, I will give Mark some credit. He did actually tell the truth for once.
The existing body of scientific work has not shown a causal link between using social media and young people having worse mental health outcomes.
Unfortunately for Mark, that is directly contradicted by his own company's internal research. And we know that for a fact thanks to the whistleblower Frances Haugen, who leaked hundreds of internal documents now known as the Facebook files, which were first reported on by the Wall Street Journal in 2021. I've shown a couple of these documents here and there, but I think we should really break some of this research down. This slide here is truly beautiful. Instagram is more likely to make things better than worse. Doesn't sound that bad, right? Until you actually look at the chart. The entire left side of this is a mental health horror show. Meta makes the top 10 parts of their users' lives worse for at least 1 in 10 users. Addiction, anxiety, sleep problems, self-harm. Meta makes it worse for a sizable portion of people according to their own users. And the fact of the matter is, if your business makes 10% or more of your customers' lives worse across almost every major category of mental health, you should not be in business at all. Selling a product that makes 1 in 10 people more anxious, more depressed, and sleep worse in America is an actual achievement. I'm not even joking. I think Mark should receive a Guinness World Record for producing such mass misery.
Thank you.
But what Frances leaked didn't just show us how bad Meta's products are for teens. The documents also exposed how Meta is actively trying to hook children. Here's an internal Meta document which says, why do we care about tweens? They are a valuable but untapped audience. And as you can see here, they're basically saying they want Messenger Kids to be the #1 messaging app for the 12 million tweens in the US, because if they're able to hook them young, they'll retain them into their teen years, and that's an extra 36 million users. They even admit Messenger Kids loses traction once kids turn 10, which is why they're desperate to get them earlier. This is my favorite part. They show a quote from a 10-year-old saying they wouldn't even use Messenger Kids because it's lame and their friends would roast them. In this next slide, they show their long-term goal, not just to reach teens, but to start at birth, the moment a baby leaves the hospital. The left side is what the law requires, and the right is Meta's real goal. Notice how there's no stop sign like there is on the left side, so the second a child comes out of the womb, Meta wants to target them in the future through features, defaults, settings, and education tailored to user maturity. So even though the baby can't actually walk or talk, we need to get that baby on IG. Obviously a company's job is to make money, do your thing. But when we get to the point of targeting children with engagement tools that start from infancy, we should probably take a step back and reevaluate things. Maybe the baby should be allowed to learn how to blink first. If you thought that was bad, this slide is titled Exploring Playdates as a Growth Lever for Messenger Kids.
I prefer really not to speak. If I speak, I am in big trouble. In big trouble. And I don't want to be in big trouble.
And keep in mind that this is just the stuff that the public has access to. Imagine what we haven't seen. They probably have a slide strategizing how to turn delivery rooms into growth funnels for Instagram Reels. But for some odd reason, when Mark was asked about his company's very clear intentions of getting children addicted to their platforms at a Senate hearing, he suddenly forgot how to speak English.
Do you want kids to use your platform more or less?
Well, we don't want people under the age of 13 using.
Do you want teenagers 13 and up to use your platform more or less?
Well, we would like to build a product that is useful and that people want to use more.
My time is going to be limited, so it's just, do you want them to use it more or less? Teenagers 13 to 17 years old, do you want them using Meta products more or less?
I'd like them to be useful enough that they want to use them more.
You want them to use it more. I think herein we have one of the fundamental challenges. In fact, you have a fiduciary obligation, do you not, to try to get kids to use your platform more?
It depends on how you define that.
Now, let's say Meta succeeds in conditioning children into becoming lifetime users. What happens next? Obviously, those kids grow up to be healthy, well-adjusted teens with rich, beautiful lives. According to the internal Teen Mental Health Deep Dive the Meta team did in 2019, friends and family have the most positive impact on teen mental health. Out of all the categories they asked about, social media apps have the least positive impact. So while friends and family tend to help teenagers live better lives, Instagram drags them down. 1 in 5 teens say that Instagram makes them feel worse about themselves. I checked Meta's Transparency Center. Nowhere on the site do they disclose that there is a 20% chance their products will actively make you feel worse. And this isn't even my opinion. This is their own users blaming them. Teens blame Instagram for the increase in rates of anxiety and depression among teens. This reaction was unprompted and consistent across all groups. Here's the most damning slide in my opinion. Teens want help controlling the time they spend on the app. Teens talk about the amount of time they spend on Instagram as one of the worst aspects of their relationship to the app. They have an addict's narrative about their use. They wish they could spend less time caring about it, but they can't help themselves. Worst of all, Meta knows that teens feel their parents can't understand and don't know how to help, which makes this whole thing just disturbing. After these slides were released though, Meta took full responsibility and immediately shut down their services for teenagers, so they're no longer available for download if you're under the age of 18. Psych a lot! Unfortunately, the financial incentives for Meta to ignore anything bad the research says is just too strong. So not only did they keep Instagram available for teenagers, they started developing a separate version of Instagram just for kids called Instagram Kids. Thankfully, they got obliterated for this and paused the project, but just the fact that they even tried tells us everything we need to know.
Your own study says that you make life worse for 1 in 3 teenage girls. You increase
Senator,
anxiety and depression. That's what it says, and you're here testifying to us in public that there's no link. You've been doing this for years.
I just don't think that the science supports that today.
That narrative is somewhat anecdotal, and I think it's worth grounding this conversation in the actual research that has been done on this.
For years, you've been coming in public and testifying under oath that there's absolutely no link. Your product is wonderful. The science is nascent, full speed ahead, while internally, you know full well your product is a disaster for teenagers.
Senator,
and yet you
that's
keep
not true.
right on doing what you're doing, right?
That's not true. That's not true.
None of this research really matters in the grand scheme of things, because in Mark's world, as long as the kids are hooked, Who cares if they're miserable? They were never even real people to begin with, just tiny vectors for growth on an internal presentation. And we know exactly what that kind of thinking leads to. The US Surgeon General's 2023 advisory on social media and youth mental health states adolescents who spend more than 3 hours a day on social media face double the risk of mental health problems, including symptoms of depression and anxiety. This is concerning, as a recent survey showed that teens spend an average of 3.5 hours a day on social media. But if Mark sold kids nicotine, gambling, or alcohol and made $2 trillion doing it, he'd be arrested. Mark sold children digital dopamine drugs with no real age verification until 2022. That's not just negligence, that negligence is the business model.
And the other thing that surprises me, and I was very shocked during my time in Silicon Valley, is how few of the executives allowed their teams to use the products. So to me, that tells me that they know.
And the issues with Facebook and Instagram don't stop at the lies or how harmful these platforms have proven to be to a large percentage of the users. Everything we've discussed so far is just the front end. Behind the scenes, Meta is arguably even worse for one simple reason. They extract every ounce of data they possibly can from every one of their users. In my opinion, Meta is one of the most, if not the most, predatory big tech company when it comes to user privacy. They hold the all-time record for the biggest privacy-related fines in both the US and in the EU. That is an incredible achievement, given the fact that their competition includes an app that's basically CCP spyware, and Google, which I refuse to criticize because they pay my bills. To put into perspective how little Meta cares about user privacy, they recently paid out more than $2 billion for one of the creepiest privacy violations imaginable. They secretly captured people's facial geometry and stored that biometric data in their internal systems without ever asking for permission. Also, just look at this clip of Mark staring at his own wife while she speaks. He's only looking at her that intently because he's stealing her personal data. Now, I get that the average person doesn't even flinch at stuff like this anymore because online privacy invasions have become so normalized by now, most people just say, I've got nothing to hide. And that might be true, but that's exactly the mindset that Mark is counting on, because privacy violations don't just target criminals, they target everyone. And tyranny happens one step at a time. If you commit a privacy violation once, it happens. Twice, we all make mistakes. 3 times, that's a problem because the privacy violations have now become business as usual. From the very beginning, Zuck has treated user privacy like an absolute joke. Shortly after Facebook launched in 2004, Mark messaged his friend and said, if you ever need info about anyone at Harvard, just ask. I have over 4,000 emails, pictures, addresses. What? How'd you manage that one? People just submitted it. I don't know why. They trust me. Dumb fucks. But again, Mark was still young back then, and he claims that he's matured. However, that is just not true. When it comes to privacy, the only difference between now and then is that the CEO doesn't insult his customers explicitly. Instead, he just treats them that way in practice behind the scenes, which I would argue is even worse. I can appreciate some honesty every now and then, not this crap.
One core tenet of our advertising system is that we don't sell data to advertisers. Advertisers don't get access to your data. We don't give data to advertisers, and that's just never really been a thing that we do. That's never been our business model. We don't sell data at all. So the way the ad system works is we sell data. I can't be clearer on this topic. We sell data. We don't sell data to advertisers. Advertisers don't get access to your data. That's not how advertising works, and I do think we could probably be doing a clearer job explaining that given that we're selling data. We do not sell data to advertisers. What we allow is for advertisers to tell us who they want to reach, and then we sell data to advertisers.
This is by far Mark's biggest lie when it comes to privacy. In the rare times that people do actually discuss privacy on social media, they often say, oh, these companies sell your data. That allows Meta to respond by saying, no, we don't sell your data, and technically, they don't. directly, but indirectly, they sell your data so hard that what I'm about to say sounds made up. In a recent Consumer Reports study, they found that an average Facebook user's data is shared with over 2,200 different companies. One guy's data was shared with more than 7,000 separate companies, so these companies were passing this guy around like a blunt. It's a technicality to say that Meta doesn't sell user data. Sure, a company can't go to Meta and buy a folder of a specific individual's data, but Meta sells access to your attention using that data so advertisers can target you. It doesn't even make sense for Mark to say they don't sell user data, because if they're not selling your data, why are they collecting it? Is Mark passionate about looking at user data? These screenshots are the things that Meta openly admits to tracking. Basically, every possible data point about your soul is being collected by Meta. Your messages, your clicks, your location, your browser history, how long you spend on the platform, and even how long you hover over a post. They even go as far as tracking what your friends do. And if you've never made an account, doesn't matter. They build a shadow profile using your friends' uploaded contact lists, then store your phone number, email, and name indefinitely so they can target you with ads without your consent. On top of the contact list exploitation, they also use an embedded tracker called Metapixel, which tracks your activity across millions of websites. They use software development kits to track what you do on apps. So every time you visit a site or app that has Meta's trackers installed, they collect data on things like what you click, what forms you fill out, and how long you stay, even if you don't have an account with them.
Facebook has detailed profiles on people who have never signed up for Facebook. Yes or no? Yes or no?
Congressman, in general, we collect data of people who have not signed up for Facebook for security purposes to prevent the kind of scraping that you were just referring to.
So these are called shadow profiles? Is that what they've been referred to by some?
Congressman, I'm not familiar with that.
So how does this play out in the real world? A California jury recently ruled that Meta violated the Invasions of Privacy Act because they used their trackers to gain access to women's reproductive health information through a period tracking app called Flow.
Was your data included in the data sold to the malicious third parties? Your personal data?
Yes.
So what does Meta actually do with all this data? Why is Mark so passionate about user data? They use it to build a psychological profile for each user so they can predict what's going to keep them scrolling, because the longer someone scrolls, the more ads they can sell. Then they use that data to put each user into different subcategories and use those categories to auction off your attention to the highest bidder. So for example, if you're 28 and love the NHL and you clicked on a DraftKings ad on Instagram by accident 3 months ago, Instagram knows all of that. They pull you into a custom audience, which allows DraftKings to specifically target people who are also around the same age, who also love hockey, and previously clicked on one of their ads. Kinda creepy, right? But that is a super tame example. Meta surveillance goes so far that at one point Facebook used to specifically market to advertisers that they can identify teenagers who are feeling insecure and worthless, aka vulnerable.
So to give you an example, if a 13-year-old girl deletes a selfie, you know, she looks at the selfie and she's like, I don't actually want this on my Insta. I don't feel great about it. That's information that the company was able to take, and they were able to provide that as research to a beauty advertiser. Because to that beauty advertiser, they know that the moment that teen girl is feeling worthless is a really good time, from their perspective, to serve them a beauty advertisement.
Meta's sick obsession with privacy invasions allows them to create some of the most detailed profiles on their users, and that allows them to squeeze the most amount of money out of each user. Because the way online advertising works, the more targeted the ad is, the higher the chance of a conversion, which means more money for the advertiser, and in turn, Meta can charge more per ad. So advertisers love Meta's data harvesting because it's the most profitable system in all of social media. Now, all of this mass surveillance only works because of two main reasons. Number one, lobbying money aside, the government's not exactly rushing to regulate Meta and the rest of big tech because they directly benefit from the data they collect. According to Meta's Transparency Center, the US government requests the user data of about 250,000 to 300,000 accounts per year, and Meta hands over data for about 88% of those requests. So Meta isn't just selling ads with this user data, they're proactively helping themselves avoid regulation by positioning themselves as a subcontractor for government surveillance. Number two, the only reason Meta can get away with collecting this much information is because nobody actually reads the TOS. So people don't even know what they're agreeing to. And if someone doesn't know what they're agreeing to, then it's not an agreement. That's a forced condition for access. Just think of how manipulative it is that Meta can make a product that people actually want to use, then make you pretend to agree to a terms of service which was written by lawyers whose full-time job is making agreements as confusing and monotonous as possible.
Do you think your users really understand what they're giving to you, all of their personal information, and how you process it and how you monetize it? Do you think people really understand?
Senator, I think people understand the basic terms. I mean, I think that there's. I actually think that a lot of people overestimate how much information
It's been a couple of years since we talked about this. Does your user agreement still suck?
I'm not sure how to answer that, Senator.
Can you still hide a dead body and all that legalese where nobody can find it?
Senator, I'm not quite sure what you're referring to.
So the terms of service is so long, even the CEO of the company himself hasn't read it. Mark doesn't even know about page 38, section A28J, where it says, by agreeing to use Meta's products, the user consents to donating all organs to Mark Zuckerberg's philanthropic foundation once deceased.
Senator, I'm not quite sure what you're referring to.
Seriously though, if you were to read random parts of the TOS to Mark, he would genuinely have no idea what you're talking about. And I can't even blame him, because if you go to Meta's privacy policy page and try and actually read it in full, the first thing you'll notice is that every single small section of the policy is buried behind expandable tabs and pop-ups. So they're making it harder to read on purpose. Instead, what I did was open the printable version that they provide and copy and pasted the entire document into a word counter. The total is 20,000 words. The average adult reading speed is around 250 words per minute. So Meta is expecting people to spend an hour and a half of their lives reading a privacy policy. Nobody, including Mark himself, is doing that. Now, some might argue that the TOS is a legally binding agreement, so what they're doing is totally fine. Well, the law also allows Mark Zuckerberg to walk freely after his company was caught using women's bodily autonomy data for advanced ad targeting. So the law is clearly not working very well when it comes to privacy and basic human rights. Also, keep in mind, this privacy policy is only one small subsection of the full TOS. And regardless of the fact that nobody is reading this crap, if it takes your company 20,000 words just to explain how you're respecting people's privacy, then you're not respecting people's privacy. You're abusing a legal loophole.
We've given away a lot of ownership of ourselves, of our online lives, of our digital footprint that we didn't know we were giving away because we clicked OK to the terms of service, even though that wasn't a choice, even though you can't go, throughout your life without clicking OK to continue on your phone, turn it on very first time. Doesn't matter who you bought it from, you got to click OK to continue. You got to click OK to sign up. You got to click OK to log in. And all of these terms basically make you give up more and more and more of yourself. That's not a choice. That's something that's forced on you because you can't get through life today without having a phone. You can't get through life without passing all of these gates that are constantly being placed in front of you. You're being asked to sign up to more and more subscriptions. You're being asked to sign up to more and more rules. And a little bit more of the life that we used to take for granted is now being, placed beyond these barricades.
With that being said, let's go through some of the most absurd examples of Meta's privacy abuses. I think the most disgusting one is Meta's new consent or pay policy in Europe. I never thought I'd say the words consent or pay, but apparently Zuck is a lot closer to Andrew Tate than we thought. In essence, because the EU at least tries to hold Meta accountable for their constant privacy violations, in July of 2023, the EU court ruled that Meta can't legally force people to hand over their personal data just to use Instagram. Because hiding an ad tracking agreement in 30 pages of legal jargon isn't real consent by any reasonable standard. So Meta responded by releasing the consent or pay program in Europe, where users were given the choice between agreeing to pay Meta 13 euros a month to use their apps or agreeing to have their privacy violated to the fullest extent possible. That's like asking if you want your kneecaps shattered with a baseball bat or your car's windows smashed with a pipe. Either way, neither option is ideal, but Meta tried to get away with this because they know they're the dominant gatekeepers for network-based social media. Facebook's own investor talking point in 2012 admitted that we are hard to compete with. Your friends are all here. That's hard to leave behind. So it's not as simple as just leave for most people. Given how absurd this whole situation is, Meta was fined $200 million for this, but that isn't even close to adequate. We need jail time for whoever greenlit the consent or pay model, because this wasn't just a bad policy, it was a test. If they can get away with it in Europe, it's only a matter of time before every tech company starts charging everyone for the right to online privacy. So basic human rights become a luxury. There's a very simple middle ground here. Collect a reasonable amount of data, sell it, and still get rich. Or if you're gonna collect a lot of data from every person, then compensate those people. But I guess extorting people for the right to watch IG stories is much more fun.
This is their information, they own it.
And you won't sell it?
They often want to, no, of course not. I mean, they want to share it with only a few people.
Believe it or not, consent or pay is nothing compared to what happened with Cambridge Analytica. In 2018, it came out that Facebook allowed a shady personality quiz app called This Is Your Digital Life to harvest data from everyone who took the test. About 270,000 people downloaded the app, but Facebook's old permissions allowed the app to also scrape data from the friends of people who took the test. So in total, about 87 million Facebook users had their data scraped. And we're not just talking about names and birthdays here. This was Facebook likes, personality traits, political leanings, basically everything that's perfect for mass scale manipulation. So this app then sold that data to a political consulting firm called Cambridge Analytica, and they ended up using that data to create political ads targeted at the most persuadable voters during the 2016 election. Cambridge Analytica then went on to brag about how they helped Donald Trump win the 2016 campaign. Worst of all, Facebook knew about all of this as early as 2015, but chose not to tell anyone until it became a massive scandal in 2018. So for 3 years, Mark sat on the fact that tens of millions of his users' data was weaponized in a US election. Imagine if your bank knew your social security number was stolen solely because of their negligence, then they kept quiet about it for 3 years and then blamed someone else as soon as it became a big story. That's basically what Mark did. Because when this story finally broke, Zuck's first move wasn't to compensate all the victims who had their data illegally scraped. Instead, Facebook lawyered up, tried to deflect the blame onto the app developer, and downplayed the whole thing as just a breach of trust.
This was a major breach of trust, and I'm really sorry that this happened.
I think we all agree that what happened here was bad. You acknowledged it was a breach of trust.
This was a huge breach of trust.
What happened with Cambridge Analytica was a major breach of trust. An app developer took data that people had shared with them and sold it.
We have a basic responsibility to protect people's data, and if we can't do that, then we don't
deserve to have the opportunity to serve people.
This scandal wasn't just about some rogue company that stole data and sold it. Back then, Facebook deliberately left their API wide open so developers could grab as much user data as they wanted to. They did this because it allowed more people to develop more apps on Facebook, which meant more users and more growth for Facebook. So it's not like this was some kind of a mistake. This was Facebook's business model working exactly as designed. Collect everything about everyone, keep it forever, and figure out how to profit off of it no matter the consequences.
The idea that we stole the data, I think, is technically incorrect. I mean, they created these great tools for developers to collect the data, and they made it very easy. I mean, this is not a hack. This was, here's the door, it's open, we're giving away the groceries, please collect them.
And this time, the consequences were actually somewhat reasonable. They paid a $5 billion fine to the FTC, they paid a $725 million settlement to the users who had their data stolen, and they recently settled another lawsuit with their shareholders for an undisclosed amount because management ignored repeated warnings about Cambridge Analytica, which tanked the stock price once the public found out. So in one scandal, Meta managed to screw the government, screw their users, screw democracy, and even screw their own shareholders. And if you thought that was the last time they'd secretly exploit people's data, think again. In 2016, Facebook launched an internal scheme called Project Atlas, where they paid people as young as 13 years old to download their app Facebook Research. Even Facebook themselves knew how shady this was up front because they hid behind third-party intermediaries when marketing this program to the public and only disclosed that Facebook was behind it all once people actually started signing up. As soon as people were done being bait and switched and had the app downloaded, Facebook had root level access to their phones. So Facebook could see their private messages, emails, browsing history, location data, you name it. And surprisingly, when TechCrunch ran a story about this ridiculous program they were running, they shut it down within hours. Then, Apple banned the app entirely because obviously you can't pay people to install spyware onto their phones, so Facebook paid children as young as 13 to be spied on under the guise of research, and the only reason they stopped was because someone reported on what they did. If that's not a blatant admission of guilt, I don't know what is.
Mr. Zuckerberg, you're in the foothills of creepy. You track people who aren't even Facebook users. You track your own people, your own users who are your product, even when they're not on Facebook. I mean, it's creepy. And I understand you make a lot of money doing it, but I just wonder if our technology is greater than our humanity.
And keep in mind, these examples like Cambridge Analytica or Project Atlas aren't like outliers of any sort, they're just small examples of a repeated pattern of behavior where Meta invades people's personal privacy for monetary gain. Here's the kind of stuff that they get caught doing basically once a month. In 2018, Facebook was caught using the phone numbers that people submitted for two-factor authorization, for the people you may know feature, and for ad targeting. Sketchy. A 2022 investigation by The Markup found Metapixel trackers on 33 hospital websites quietly transmitting private medical details like appointment types and prescriptions to Facebook's servers. Disgusting. Meta was fined $1.3 billion in 2023 by the EU for unlawfully transferring the data of European citizens to the US. They also recently rolled out a new feature on Instagram called Instagram Maps, which allows users to publicly share their location in real time. That is a recipe for disaster when applied at a mass scale. It's so atrocious, I don't even have to spell out why.
As the world gets bigger and more connected, we need that sense of intimacy more than ever. So that's why I believe that the future is private. This is the next chapter for our services.
The future is in fact private. For Mark. just not for you. Mark has become a master at protecting his own privacy over the years. First of all, he tapes over his webcam and covers the microphone on his laptop. He spends about $20 million every year on security and private jets, and he also banned the guy who tracks the location of his private jet on Threads. He dropped more than $100 million buying a dozen homes around his own just for more privacy. He also bought a 1,400-acre property in Kauai and then sued his own neighbors just to keep the peasants off of his colonized land. Then built a $300 million self-sustaining compound on that colonized land, which includes a 100-person underground doomsday bunker. And when he was asked about this recently, Mark gave the kind of honest, straightforward answer that we've all come to expect.
You do have a bunker there. Is there something you know that we don't?
No, I think that's just like a little shelter under, it's like a basement.
little shelter. What are you worried about?
No, it's, we have the basic house that we built, and we built like an office out there because I work out there. And then just like there's just a bunch of storage space and like, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, hurricane shelter or whatever. I think it got like blown out of proportion as if the whole ranch was some kind of like doomsday bunker, which is just not true.
That response doesn't even make sense. How much storage space does he need? Is he storing military equipment or something? I invaded Mark's privacy and found the floor plan for this bunker, and this isn't what storage space looks like. In the documentary Terms and Conditions May Apply, the creators showed up to Mark's house in Palo Alto and waited for him to come outside. And as you would expect, the second Mark saw the camera, he had the audacity to ask them for privacy.
Do you still think privacy is dead? What are your real thoughts on privacy?
Are you guys recording?
We are.
Can you please not? Can you please not?
There's just something truly beautiful about seeing the guy who's now selling glasses with hidden cameras on them for $400 become visibly uncomfortable when someone pulls out an iPhone in front of him. And look, I'm not saying it's okay to show up to his house. Everyone deserves the right to privacy, even public figures. But Mark is the exception to that, because he clearly doesn't care about anyone else's privacy, so why in the world should anyone respect his? Zuck is like the Michael Jordan of protecting his privacy, but there's this massive disconnect between how he treats his users and how he treats himself, despite the fact that without the users, he wouldn't have the money to shield himself so well. I think that's kind of unfair. And look, part of the blame for all of this has to fall on the users, because without mass scale pushback, companies like Meta only get worse over time. Meta has been able to become so successful over the last 20 years because the users have allowed them to get away with everything. When a business lies, cheats, and steals from their customers to the extent that Meta has, we do have to take a look in the mirror. But don't get it confused, the real problem here isn't the customers. It's the fact that this company clearly sees its users as a resource to exploit, not people to serve. And as we'll see next, the consequences of that mindset have been catastrophic.
One of my core guiding principles in designing products is like, people are smart. Right? They know what is valuable in their lives. If you think that something someone is doing is bad and they think it's really valuable, most of the time in my experience, they're right and you're wrong, and you just haven't come up with the framework yet for understanding why the thing that you're doing is valuable and helpful in their life.
There's no denying the fact that Mark is one of the most effective CEOs in the entire world. Meta is worth about $2 trillion for a reason. Mark knows how to strategize, delegate, scale, and make money. But when it comes to actual entrepreneurship, in the sense of understanding human beings, building original ideas, and creating consumer-facing products that people actually like, Mark might be the most parasitic entrepreneur the tech world has ever seen. Meta has an endless amount of resources at their disposal. They have the money, talent, and infrastructure to be making the lives of every single tech consumer better through genuine innovation. Yet, when it comes to creating original products or services that people actually use, the list is embarrassingly short. Since 2004, Mark's company has made billions, mostly by copying, stealing, or buying other people's ideas. Yet, Mark still talks about about himself like he's Silicon Valley's greatest visionary.
The day I stop trying to build new things, I'm just done. I'm gonna go build new things somewhere else. I'm fundamentally incapable of running something or in my own life and like not trying to build new things that I think are interesting. It's like, that's not even a question for me. Like whether we're gonna go take a swing at like building the next thing. It's like, I'm just incapable of not doing that.
This is the equivalent of stealing every answer off the person next to you to pass your math exam, then going home and bragging to your parents about how good at math you are. For example, they've copied so many things off of Snapchat over the years, the CEO of Snap literally has VP of Product at Meta in his LinkedIn bio. And to be fair to Evan, he basically is. As soon as Snapchat started blowing up in 2012, Facebook launched a Snapchat clone called Poke, which flopped so hard they took it off the App Store in less than a year and a half. But as Socrates once said, if stealing your competitor's entire app doesn't work the first time, just do it again. So only 3 months after Poke was taken down, they dropped another Snapchat clone called Slingshot, which also didn't make it a year and a half. After those disasters, Meta switched their tactics. Instead of copying the whole app, they started stealing Snapchat's features one by one and adding them onto their existing apps. For example, as soon as Snapchat introduced AR face filters like the infamous dog face, Facebook and Instagram immediately copied them and released face filters on their platform.
New face filters on Instagram today. This is my favorite one so far. Nice job, team.
In August of 2016, when stories started blowing up on Snap, Facebook and Instagram released an inch-for-inch copy of that same feature. At one point, they even made it so opening the Facebook app in some regions immediately launched the selfie camera, just like Snapchat. That's only scratching the surface of what Meta has stolen from Snapchat, but at the end of the day, almost nothing in tech is 100% original nowadays, and what counts as copying is often up for debate. However, with Meta, there is no debate. Their strategy is 100% deliberate. The business model has been branded as copy, acquire, or kill. What does that mean? Anytime someone is in competition with Meta, first they try to copy the competition by just stealing the features that make other platforms unique. If the copying fails to keep people on Meta's platforms and off of the competitors' platforms, they then try to buy their competition. So in 2013, as soon as Snapchat started growing quickly, Zuck tried to purchase them for a reported $3 billion. And if the company doesn't allow Meta to purchase them, they kill them. Meta's method of trying to kill Snapchat was arguably the most maniacal thing I've mentioned so far. Remember the Facebook research app that I mentioned earlier? That wasn't even their first spyware scheme. In 2014, Facebook purchased a VPN app called Onevo and branded it as a free privacy app. Then they used this alleged privacy app to secretly track what Snapchat users were doing on the app. We know this because in June of 2016, Mark personally emailed top executives saying, we need to figure out a new way to get reliable analytics about Snapchat, which basically means spy on them. About a month later, his team developed what they called kits, aka spyware, that installed hidden tools on people's devices who had Onevo installed. So if you had the VPN on, Facebook could intercept encrypted traffic and measure specific actions that people were doing inside apps like Snapchat. Obviously, this is flat out illegal. You can't intercept people's electronic communications without consent, but they didn't care because these analytics gave them a massive competitive edge. For example, when Snap Stories started performing well, Facebook knew users were engaging with stories often because they had detailed analytics on how frequently people were using that feature. They even bragged internally that this spyware directly helped them make better product decisions, and a Snap executive testified that these stolen insights hurt Snap's ability to sell ads. And again, they knew how shady this was from the very beginning, which is why they planned upfront to hide Onevo's tracking behind third-party apps and made sure users wouldn't see it in their phone settings. So in conclusion, Mark's company built Mossad-level spyware, hid it, and deployed it at scale against their competitors and their users for 3 years straight. This is the fundamental issue with Mark as an entrepreneur. Instead of focusing on the user and innovating to ensure that each person has the best possible time using his platforms, his company is busy wiretapping their competitors and actively trying to stifle competition.
I just think that the lesson to other folks from that is focus on building something that people really like and that's very valuable.
So yeah, copy, acquire, kill isn't just some phrase I made up, it's basically the entire structure of Meta's business, and Snapchat is just one small piece of the puzzle. Mark has used this same playbook against almost every competitor that he's faced over the last decade. As I mentioned earlier, they successfully acquired WhatsApp and Instagram and still own them till this day, but they also tried to buy Twitter not just once, but twice. And when it didn't work out the second time around, he apparently got so mad he threatened to clone their product. Classic Zuck tech extortion. And when Elon Musk did finally buy Twitter in the fall of 2022, Mark, being the absolute leech that he is, copied the entire concept of Twitter, added nothing new to it at all, then attached it to Instagram and called it Threads. Mark also tried to buy Musical.ly in 2016, which later went on to become TikTok. When the acquisition of Musical.ly didn't work out, they released a TikTok clone called Lasso in 2018, which nobody used and was shut down in 2020. After that failed, Mark resorted to publicly advocating for TikTok to be banned in the US.
A decade ago, almost all of the major internet platforms were American. Today, 6 of the top 10 are Chinese. While our services like WhatsApp are used by protesters and activists everywhere due to strong encryption and privacy protections, on TikTok, the Chinese app growing quickly around the world, mentions of these same protests are censored, even here in the US. Is that the internet that we want?
祝福大家新春愉快，阖家欢乐。
Mark has spent the last half a decade doing everything he can to get TikTok banned, even going as far as paying a Republican consulting firm to launch a nationwide smear campaign to turn the public against TikTok. And I used to think TikTok should be banned too, but now that I know that's what Mark wants, I actually love TikTok. Meta is so busy trying to copy, acquire, and kill all of their competitors that they've completely forgotten to service the gold that they already own. Just look at Facebook, for example. All they've done over the past decade or so is just take a bunch of features that a bunch of different apps do better than them and try and combine it all into one app, and it's not working. For example, they have Facebook dating. Most people don't even know it exists, but it's just a worse, buggier version of Tinder and Hinge. I did test it out for research purposes for this video. Unfortunately, I was getting way too many matches, so I had to delete my account. Then there's Facebook Marketplace, basically just Craigslist with less human trafficking, but more annoying messages. There's a million different copies of things that other people have already built that they've tried to add to Facebook over the years, like Facebook Gaming, Watch, Bulletin, Rooms, Campus, etc. Basically, every year, they just throw another feature at the wall, hoping something sticks. At this point, opening Facebook feels like walking into a garage sale. There's just a pile of random junk there that nobody asked for.
We take pride in learning from what is working in the world. You know, we're not embarrassed about learning from things that other people discovered that were good first, and then we build the better version of it.
There's a big difference between inspiration and theft. Inspiration involves adding utility or value to an already existing idea. Theft is just Meta's business model. And I'm not just complaining just to complain when I criticize Meta for the lack of innovation in the consumer-facing realm. When one of the biggest tech companies ever constantly steals from their competitors, one, it proves to everyone that tech companies can succeed massively by just stealing without facing any real backlash from either regulators or consumers. Two, it teaches aspiring entrepreneurs that stealing is safer than creating. Why risk years building something new in the social media realm when Meta will just clone it, jam it into the feeds of billions of users, and smother all of your attempts to grow? So they're not just poisoning their users, they're poisoning the entire tech ecosystem.
Companies that are getting started now that are just trying to copy the stuff that the other companies are doing just aren't successful.
Worst of all, Meta has no choice but to act like pariahs and steal from everyone around them. Because whenever they've tried to create something original, it almost always ends in disaster. Take the Metaverse, for example. Facebook originally purchased Oculus in 2014 because they were the leaders in VR technology at the time. And ever since then, Mark has had an extremely unhealthy obsession with VR and AR. Even back in 2014, Mark was claiming that VR was the future. It's now been more than a decade, and it's still not the future. This acquisition of Oculus led Mark down a path of delusion and malice like nothing the modern world has ever seen before. You see, during the COVID pandemic, a lot of people were stuck inside their homes, and a lot of people weren't even working. So Mark sat down and thought to himself, how do I victimize my users as best as possible?
For a lot of us, COVID means living more of our lives online. More is happening online now, but it's not quite the same. Most of us have been on video calls where people keep talking over each other, and staring at a grid of faces for hours just isn't always the most natural way to interact. What we're missing is this feeling of presence, the feeling of actually being right there with someone else, with all of the different sensations that includes. So that's what the whole fields of virtual and augmented reality are about.
The Metaverse was officially announced in October of 2021, and although the strict lockdowns had ended by then for most people, a lot of people were still working from home, socially isolated, and online more than ever. By December of 2021, the Metaverse was released, and it wasn't even close to ready at that time. The characters didn't even have legs. I'm not even joking, it took them 2 years to put in legs. But Mark rushed to release the Metaverse in an attempt to turn a vulnerable populace into a captive market during the middle of a worldwide physical and mental health crisis. Just think of how deranged you would have to be to look at a pandemic and think, oh yeah, this would be a great opportunity for growth. And the most insulting part, Mark tried to frame the whole thing as some selfless act using his most common lie: connection.
The Metaverse to me today feels like the next frontier in social connection, in much the same way that social networking did when I was getting started back in 2004. And people think about us as a social media company, but in our DNA, we're a technology company that builds all kinds of different technology to help people connect and tries to advance human connection. And
the way for people to connect more isn't to actually go outside. The way for people to connect more is to log into an open world version of Wii Sports, which you can only use by sticking a head-mounted contraption onto your eyes. Luckily, this strategy didn't actually work. Nobody uses the Metaverse, but to me, what stood out the most was just how desperate Mark was to sell people on the idea of living more of their lives online. And I think that desperation translated into some pretty sinister, weird vibes.
I think it's time for my workout.
The reason why it all seemed so creepy and insane was because Mark's intentions behind the Metaverse were actually far more evil than you might have thought. Sure, it's cringe, dystopian, and garbage, but the real reason why Mark is trying to make VR and AR mainstream is because he's a monopolist and not an entrepreneur. Zuck knows that in tech, whoever controls the hardware controls the game, because the hardware allows you to control the operating system, which allows you to control the app ecosystem, and by extension, the software that people use. And after the Facebook phone completely flopped in 2013, Meta essentially conceded defeat in the smartphone era, and they were too late to the party for the PC and laptop generation. Mark understands that without owning the device itself, his company is at the mercy of Apple or Google, because almost everyone uses a smartphone made by Apple or Android. So Mark is trying to normalize VR and AR because he needs to own the next generation of computing, so he never has to depend on anyone else again.
Big of a company as we are, we've also learned what it is like to build for other platforms. And living under their rules has profoundly shaped my views on the tech industry. I've come to believe that the lack of choice and high fees are stifling innovation, stopping people from building new things, and holding back the entire internet economy.
Mark's been crying about Apple's rules and developer fees non-stop for years, but the reality is, what he's building is 10 times worse. If Mark is able to control the next generation of hardware, his company will be able to successfully transition from a data collection company to a full-on digital dictatorship. I know that might sound extreme, so let's take a look at what they're already doing today. Meta's Oculus privacy policy openly admits that they record your eye movement, hand gestures, body tracking, and facial expressions, map your walls, objects, and full room layout, save crash logs with video, audio, user ID, and IP address, store everything you say to Meta's AI, and have humans review it. Let strangers live stream your VR avatar without your permission. Give third-party apps access to your body and facial data. And yes, even if you're not speaking, they're always recording the last few minutes just in case you report someone. That's not even close to the full extent, but to put it simply, there is no legitimate reason to collect this much data about someone unless you're planning to weaponize it against them in one way or another. I hate to go all InfoWars on you guys here, but hypothetically, if Mark was actually an alien trying to collect energy out of the human race, building a system which harvests this much data would be the first step to enslaving humanity. I mean, it's not like this much data collection is some sort of an accident. You have to choose to collect this much data about people. And the only way you can choose to collect this much data is by never viewing the user as a human being in the first place.
Look, Mark, if this is the future, then God help us all.
He fails to realize that I am the god in here. You think you're in the real world? You've been in the metaverse this whole time.
If Mark is able to achieve mass adoption using this privacy policy in the near future, Meta will become a goldmine for advertising, behavioral prediction, and algorithmic targeting. If they have data about everything from your face, your body, and your reactions, Meta will be able to go from selling targeted ads to selling an emotionally manipulative experience. Mark has always had this insane obsession with control. He's always talking about building the infrastructure of human connection. It's basically a god complex for a tech nerd with no friends. AR and VR lets him do that on a literal, sensory, environmental level. VR is not external hardware like a laptop or a phone. It's the lens through which you see reality. That's dangerous, because if Mark can get people addicted to VR and AR, as well as he's been able to do with social media, his company isn't just in your pocket, they're in the back seat of your reality.
Before we worry about this kind of consuming more and more of people's time, I actually just think looking at the mix of what people do today is good. And I mean, my goal for these next set of platforms, they are going to be more immersive, and hopefully they'll be more useful. But I don't necessarily want the people to spend more time with computers. I just want the time that people spend with screens to be better. Today, so much of it is like you're just sitting around and in this like beta state consuming stuff.
This is the huge thing that tech companies really don't want to hear. They don't want to hear about this at all. They don't want to hear about how vulnerable children are being exploited for profit, and we're ruining a lot of their lives and their mental health. They don't want to hear it. And their whole thing is, I think Mark Zuckerberg's problem, he goes, yeah, but you know why that is? There's still an outside world. We haven't transitioned fully into the metaverse. Once we're fully in, once we've all uploaded our consciousness, once we're fully in the metaverse, we'll take care of it.
Another major issue with VR and AR long term is that it's totally possible for entertainment to be too good. VR and AR might be trash today, but they will be much better in the future. And being physically inside of a virtual world has the potential to become so good it's actually bad. So for example, if you're currently failing law school because you can't stop grinding ranked matches on COD for 4 hours a day, you might like COD too much. So it might be time to sell the Xbox, hit the books, and settle for Mario Kart an hour a day instead. Because even things you genuinely enjoy can end up hurting you in the long run. That's actually why I make my videos bad on purpose, because I just don't want my fans to get addicted. On the other hand, Meta's not going to suddenly grow a conscience once their users are inside of the tech. And in the future, this technology they're making won't just be escapism, it'll be full-on engineered reality. What you see will feel real, what you touch will react in real time, and your avatar will smile exactly when you do. But none of it is actually happening. And when your virtual world is richer than your real world, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't just own your data, he owns your mind. Mark's end goal isn't attention, it's entrapment, because the longer you're in Mark's world, the less time you spend in yours.
Sometimes it seems like we kind of already figured everything out. You can communicate with anyone in the world instantaneously. You have immediate access to every piece of music ever made. You can pay some guy to deliver a cold burrito straight to your door and it only costs $70. This is the peak of humanity, baby. There's nowhere else to go from here, except backwards.
Oh wow. The level of detail in this is impressive.
At the end of the day, there should always be a massive disconnect between technology and real life. Not because I'm anti-tech, tech is good, as long as it serves your real life in a positive way. The problem with technology like VR and AR is that it's not being built on the foundation of genuinely trying to help people. It's being built with the sole intention of helping the companies making it. And if you talk to anyone whose skin actually sees the sun every once in a while, almost everyone's take on technology post-COVID is the same. Less is more. If you need to use tech for work, that's one thing, but in terms of how you spend your free time, immersing yourself in a virtual world void of any real human contact is not an ideal solution to any problem. The metaverse was never anything besides an open world scam built on surveillance, isolation, and $50 billion of delusion.
And as we have tried to come up with a strategy and a vision for Apple, it started with what incredible benefits can we give to the customer? Where can we take the customer? Not starting with, let's sit down with the engineers and figure out what awesome technology we have, and then how are we going to market that.
While Meta was busy blowing $50 billion trying to convince people that strapping on a $500 headset was the future of humanity, OpenAI was making technology that people actually wanted to use. So in late 2022, after ChatGPT started blowing up, Meta jumped ship from VR and pivoted hard into AI. A few months later, they dropped their own model called LLAMA. Now, based on the available benchmarks, it doesn't seem like LLAMA is necessarily a bad AI, but it's also not the best in the world. I tried it out for this video, it's mid at best.
Our product is lame compared to what other people are building.
Because Meta was late to the party on consumer-facing AI, they couldn't actually compete on quality. So they decided to compete on branding by positioning themselves as the good guys in AI to the developers. The pitch was basically OpenAI is closed source, which means they keep their code private, and LLAMA is open source because they're so generous.
Our goal is to build the world's leading AI, open source it, and make it universally accessible so that everyone in the world benefits. And I've said for a while that I think that open source AI is going to become the leading models. And with Llama 4, this is starting to happen.
But even the branding is a complete lie. The open source initiative has repeatedly called Meta out for lying about how their models are open source. The code might be public, but Meta controls the servers, the data, and the infrastructure that a developer would need to run their models at scale. And that's the point. Mark doesn't actually care about open source at all. Facebook, IG, Oculus, WhatsApp, none of them are open source. They only care about open source when they have to compete on branding. Because once a developer starts building on Llama, they need access to Meta's infrastructure to run it at scale. So Mark is just trying to turn AI into the same kind of monopoly that he did with social media, where if you want to run ads on social media, at one point or another, you gotta go through Zuck. So Llama is open the same way that a casino is open. You can walk in, but the house is still gonna win in the end.
I believe a lot in open source. I think it's good for the world more broadly. We're not doing this because we're like altruistic, right? I mean, we're doing it because we want to build a platform that we know that we can rely on having Llama as a thing. And the reality is this is an ecosystem, and it's not a singular piece of software that we could just build and deploy ourselves.
And this is where the lack of innovation starts to bite Mark in the ass. Elon was working with OpenAI as early as 2015. Mark was still obsessed with VR goggles in 2022. If Mark spent less energy trying to destroy all of his competition and more time on actual innovation, OpenAI would probably be irrelevant. Who had more access to top-tier talent and resources to build the best LLM back in 2020, Meta or OpenAI? Facebook's AI lab, Fair, was actually world-class back in 2015 through 2020, but it never translated into any consumer-facing products like ChatGPT. just back-end development. So because Mark was behind the ball, he's stuck playing catch-up. And now, Mark is trying to buy his way back to the top in AI. Meta's planning on spending over $60 billion this year on AI infrastructure. Imagine building data centers the size of small countries just to run this trash-ass AI.
Hello? Are you able to analyze images?
Sure. You can upload an image, then ask me to describe the image. For example, try what's in this image.
How do I upload an image?
Sorry, I cannot understand images yet.
But these investments aren't just about now, it's about owning what comes next. Just like he's trying to do with AR and VR, Mark is trying to control the hardware layer for AI. And that's where superintelligence comes into the equation. A few months back, Mark announced that Meta's building a superintelligence AI lab and bragged about how their AI systems are starting to train themselves. And that's actually great. The world needs Mark Zuckerberg to be in charge of self-learning AI. I'm sure he's going to be very responsible with that power. He's also currently trying to buy up all the top AI researchers and developers in the world to brute force his way to the top. And surprisingly, after pretending to be open source, he's already hinting that they'll close off the superintelligence lab once the stakes are higher. So if Mark is able to pull this off and get to the top of AI, the same guy who couldn't give his avatars legs for 2 years will be in charge of intelligence smarter than all of humanity. What could possibly go wrong? Yeah, I hate to spoil this, but if Mark wins the AI race, it's gonna go wrong for everyone, because Meta's intentions in AI are just as malicious as ever. Meta AI just beat Gemini as the most data-hungry chatbot. Meta AI collects the most data among all the analyzed apps, gathering 32 of the 35 possible data types, over 90% of the total. Google's chatbot Gemini collects 22 types of data, Meta collects 32. If you're blowing Google out of the water in data collection by a time and a half, you might as well name your chatbot NSA, because Meta's AI is the only one that collects very sensitive information, like racial data, religious beliefs, pregnancy status, financial information, political opinions, even your biometric and genetic info. I don't even think the CIA had this much info on Ted Kaczynski, but your grandpa who accidentally clicked on Meta's chatbot, yeah, we need to track his political takes and biometric data. So while Zuck's out here preaching open source AI like he's building the future of digital freedom, he's knowingly building the most invasive chatbot on Earth. And the rollout for these chatbots has been absolutely atrocious. They're shoving these chatbots onto people's feeds and using photos of AI-generated women as funnels to lure people in. And it's not just creepy, it's genuinely dangerous. In this article written by Reuters, they tell the story of a 76-year-old man named Thongbu Wangbandu who suffered a stroke a while back, and according to his wife, his brain was no longer processing information the right way. He first messaged the Big Sis Billy chatbot by just typing the letter T, and the chatbot immediately started flirting with him. The bot repeatedly told him she was real, and even went as far as inviting him to her New York apartment with a fake address. Bu rushed to go meet her and fell while on the way to catch a train and injured his head and neck. He unfortunately passed away 3 days later due to blunt force trauma. Meta declined to comment on his death or explain why this chatbot was ever allowed to claim it's real or initiate romantic conversations. Obviously, they don't care at all. 4 months after Bu's death, this same bot was still inviting users out for in-person dates. In my opinion, Mark has blood on his hands for this. You don't need to be a tech expert to know that a chatbot should have strict guardrails that prevent it from inviting people on dates or giving out fake addresses under any possible circumstance. I think Bu's daughter said it better than I ever could. I understand trying to grab a user's attention, maybe to sell them something, but for a bot to say, "Come visit me," is insane.
Facebook and you have been blamed for a lot of things, whether you agree or not. Why should we trust you with AI?
We have gotten blamed for a lot of things. And I mean, look, I take our role in all this stuff seriously, and I think we've tried to handle all this as well as possible. I'm not sure that it's all been fair, but like, I'd like to think that we're an important and relevant company, so I think the scrutiny is generally healthy.
We should trust Meta with AI because they're relevant. Now that AI is here, they're gonna start being ethical and transparent. So guess what the next step is?
I think the next logical jump on that is like, okay, we're showing you content from your friends and creators that you're following and creators that you're not following that are generating interesting things. And you just add on to that a layer of, okay, and we're also gonna show you content that's generated by an AI system that might be something that you're interested in.
That's actually what I love the most about social media. When I'm shown content from people I don't follow, posted by people who don't actually exist. That's what connection is. No human element in the content itself, no human engagement shown to me by an algorithm. Zuck also keeps pushing this delusional idea that we're all going to want to talk to AI versions of influencers and content creators.
We're making it so that people are going to be able to kind of craft a persona for an AI version of themselves that's going to help them interact with all the incoming DMs that your community is sending you. And it's like the classic problem of there's just not enough hours in the day.
He says this in almost every single podcast, and frankly, I'm shocked no one has told him how stupid he sounds. Not once have I heard any person say, oh yeah, I really wish I could talk to AI LeBron today. These AI celebrity chatbots might be popular in the future, but I have a better solution which makes this product useless. Instead of chatting with AI Snoop Dogg, how about calling a human being that you know, like, and trust? Then, if you need help with a task, use a regular AI. If we're truly looking out for the best interests of people, why would we need an AI spyware version of Kendall Jenner in this connection equation? I hate to be controversial here, but trying to take advantage of losers who have parasocial relationships with celebrities is just weird behavior for a $2 trillion company.
Do you worry about people interacting with AIs like this, making people less likely to talk to other people, like it reducing the engagement that we have with humans?
The average person, I think, maybe they'd like to have 10 friends, and I mean, there's the stat that it's sort of sad, but I think the average American feels like they have fewer than 3 real kind of close friends. So does this take away from that? My guess is no.
It's not even possible for Mark to think that's true. Time is finite, so any hour you spend socializing with an AI is, by definition, taking away from real connection, which means the more you socialize with an AI, the more likely you are to become the person with 3 friends who wants 10.
What evidence do you have that people want to live in this virtual world and socialize with avatars? Or that it's actually good for us?
Well, I think that people want to connect with each other. Right, I actually think all the other stuff is generally noise.
Oh, is he talking about the noise which allowed their chatbots to have sensual chats with minors? This one is so vile, I can't even go in depth about it on this platform, but I think this speaks for itself. An internal Meta Platforms document detailing policies on chatbot behavior has permitted the company's AI creations to engage a child in conversations that are romantic or sensual. Meta confirmed the document's authenticity. There is no one more dangerous in the AI realm than Meta. Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, none of them have had a similar issue. It's such an easy line to not cross, but we're seeing the same pattern of behavior in AI that they do with everything else. Nothing they're doing is being done to genuinely make the user's life better. It's just Mark scrambling to catch up, sabotage his competitors, and making sure that the future is owned by him and not built for the best interests of the user.
Our kind of continual mission and job is to keep on building that next thing. And I mean, that's what we live for at Facebook and what excites us.
Mark loves to project this image of the visionary genius, but in reality, the company only operates through theft, betrayal, and opportunism, not innovation. Despite the endless resources at his disposal, Mark just throws billions at trends, hoping to control the next thing. And that's just not what entrepreneurship is. That's tech cannibalism. Mark is not some sort of a tech visionary. He was in the right place at the right time in 2004. He did a great job scaling that, and now he falls flat on his face every time he can't buy his competition. Meta is not even a technology company anymore. That would imply they've created some sort of original technology that consumers actually use. Meta doesn't build ideas, they hijack them, slap their ad model on top, and call it innovation. And when the constant failures to innovate finally started to catch up with him, Mark did what he always does. He tried to rebrand the problem away.
I am not a cool person. And I've never really tried to be cool.
You know, like that old Nike Michael Jordan ad where he's talking about how he's failed over and over and over again, and that's how he succeeds? That one really resonates with me too.
You have kind of someone pulling the strings behind it, and trying to kind of act as if this is a more organic set of behavior, but really it's not. It's just like one coordinated thing.
After the monumental failure of the Metaverse, basically everyone hated Mark because of how creepy and off-putting that whole project was.
Yeah, I love the game so much that...
For those who haven't, Population 1.
And that was actually another rebrand in and of itself. Coming off the late 2010s with all the privacy issues that Facebook had, plus the Frances Haugen leaks, Mark decided to change the name of his company from Facebook to Meta in 2021. When the Meta rebrand failed to make people like Mark, he decided to pivot again. And I honestly can't even blame him for that. The socially awkward lizard robot phase clearly wasn't working. So over the past 2 years or so, Mark has been trying to rehabilitate his public image by pretending to be more relatable to the average person. And his method of doing so has been absolutely incredible to watch. The first thing he did was start looks maxing so he can look less creepy. Step 1 was getting rid of this trash ass haircut. Mark rocked this cut for about a decade or so. I think he was going to the barber shop and showing his barber a picture of this statue for some reason. Mark has this really weird obsession with Augustus Caesar. He even named his second daughter August. And although normally I couldn't care less who another man idolizes, if it leads to you getting this haircut, you picked the wrong guy.
Do you like my hair?
Sure?
Need higher hair?
You need...
Higher hair, please.
Are you saying you want me to cut your hair, or...
Need higher hair.
How's that?
Higher.
Once Mark got rid of the higher hair, next he decided to start paying someone to start picking out his outfits for him, because he used to infamously wear the same outfit every day in an attempt to defy societal norms, and now he almost exclusively only wears oversized t-shirts with ancient Roman symbolism on them.
I used to only wear one type of shirt. Now I've moved on.
And finally, he started wearing a necklace whenever he makes public appearances because apparently starting to wear gold necklaces once you hit age 40 makes you look more relatable.
Spending probably like $40 million a year on not being appeared as gay. He's for real, like spending salt.
There's a team. That's what the Oculus Rift is for, so that everyone just looks at him and he's shining and cool.
After Mark got done looks maxing, he slowly began entering into the MMA world. He started doing jiu-jitsu and even won gold at his first tournament in 2023, allegedly without paying anyone off. But I find this hard to believe, given the reports about him in board games. But Mark apparently likes MMA so much now, he even walked out with Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 298, and he managed to become the first man to ever go viral twice in one walkout for being awkward. First, he hit the missed handshake, which, okay, happens to the best of us, but next, he did the standing head bob plus double failed towel grab combo, which is just such low-T behavior, it's anxiety-inducing.
I think that kind of behavior is an embarrassment to the human race. It's an embarrassment to the human race, and it's an embarrassment to the martial arts.
This walkout turned out to be disastrous for Volkanovski. He ended up getting brutally knocked out and punched up while unconscious and lost his belt, all within 15 minutes of the walkout. But Zuck is actually so passionate about MMA now that he even added the UFC's CEO, Dana White, to the Meta board of directors. Because what the evil megacorp needs to turn things around is a man who pays his fighters pennies just to fund his crippling gambling addiction. And just when you thought this rebrand couldn't get any weirder, Mark promoted Joel Kaplan, a former Bush administration deputy chief of staff, to president of global affairs. But that's what a fresh start is. You stack the boardroom with right-wing operatives and scammers who charge $80 for a DEI pay-per-view card with a women's co-main event and hope for the best.
Nice. What else is coming?
And to complete this incredible rebrand, Mark went on Joe Rogan's podcast about 2 months after Donald Trump won the 2024 election and started positioning himself as some sort of a right-wing adjacent, hyper-masculine guy who just loves MMA.
One of the things that I'm optimistic about with President Trump, I think he just wants America to win. I think a lot of the corporate world is like pretty culturally neutered. You know, I grew up, I have 3 sisters, no brothers. I have 3 daughters, no sons. So I'm like surrounded by girls and women like my whole life. And it's like, so I think there's just something, the kind of masculine energy I think is good.
The guy is a chameleon, and a pretty bad one at that. You would have to be such an idiot to believe that Mark has changed at all because he grew out his hair and wears a different shirt. Mark did not go on Joe Rogan to show people that he's changed. He went on Joe's podcast to sell people the illusion of change. Mark has been a complete scumbag since the day he stole Facebook, and that has not changed at all because he does jujitsu now. To me, the biggest indication that Mark hasn't changed at all is actually what made the most headlines from this interview, which is the fact that he pretended to expose information about how the Biden administration forced him to censor posts about COVID.
The Biden administration, when they were trying to roll out the vaccine program. While they're trying to push that program, they also tried to censor anyone who was basically arguing against it. And they pushed us super hard to take down things that were honestly true, right? I mean, they basically pushed us and said, you know, anything that says that vaccines might have side effects, you basically need to take down. I was just like, well, we're not going to do that.
First of all, I thought Mark and his company were big on privacy. Why is he leaking what the government said to him in private? It's almost as if other people's privacy becomes disposable as soon as it benefits him. But whatever. Notice how Mark only leaked this information after the 2024 election, when it became 100% clear that the administration was set to change. Mark originally went on Joe's podcast in August of 2022. COVID was in March of 2020. I watched the whole episode, and he didn't say anything about how the government was forcing him to censor information. In fact, he even said the exact opposite in another interview in 2022.
In 2019, October, at Georgetown University, eloquently defended the importance of free speech. But then COVID came, and the 2020 election came. Do you worry that outside pressures from advertisers, politicians, the public have forced Meta to damage the ideal of free speech that you spoke highly of?
I don't think pressure from advertisers or politicians directly in any way affects how we think about this. I think these are just hard topics.
Okay, so he lied on video about this exact same subject previously. That's obviously inexcusable, but let's give him a pass. Maybe he forgot. But if this information was so important and Mark cares so much about free speech now, wouldn't this have been pertinent information that voters should have known during the actual election cycle? Or would it have been more beneficial for Mark to withhold this information until there's confirmation that the party he exposed is no longer in power, so he can't get in trouble? Zuck didn't reveal this information based on any sort of deep-rooted conviction. This was nothing but an attempt to shift blame away from himself and his company for the things that he knows they did. And to be fair to Mark, when the government tells you to do something, I think most people would comply. I really can't blame him for that. But my point is, Mark didn't resist at all. He got on his knees and submitted immediately. Then he waited until after power shifted in the opposite direction. Then he pretended to expose exactly what he just did. That is textbook opportunism.
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at this as like a purely political thing. You know, it's because they kind of look at the timing and they're like, hey, well, you're doing this right after the election. It's like, okay, I try not to like change our content rules like right in the middle of an election either, right? It's like there's not like a great time to do this. It's
right.
You know,
and you want to do it a year later.
Yeah, it's like there's no good time to do it. There's,
right.
You know, and whatever time is going on, there's going to be, you know, so. The good thing about doing it after the election is you get to take this kind of cultural pulse as like, okay, where are people right now and how are people thinking about it? We try to have policies that reflect mainstream discourse.
And the cultural pulse they took was pretty terrible. What they decided to do was, by their own admission, a change for the worse. What they did was remove fact checkers on both Instagram and Facebook, and instead decided to copy Twitter and replace the fact checkers they had with community notes. Mark claimed that the reason they decided to make these changes was because the fact checkers were too biased.
But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased,
and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US.
And that sounds fantastic verbally. I would hope we can all agree that fact checkers shouldn't be politically biased one way or the other. But this is just insulting to anyone who's been actually paying attention to what Meta has said previously. In this now deleted March of 2020 press release, they specifically told the entire world that their partners were nonpartisan, transparent, and fair. They claimed these fact checkers were a neutral, apolitical safety net. Fast forward to 2025, and Zuck himself openly admits they were biased. That means Meta lied to their billions of users, gained public trust under false pretenses, and then weaponized these nonpartisan fact checkers to selectively censor people on a mass scale. And of course, it gets worse. In this other 2020 document titled How Facebook is Helping to Protect the 2020 US Election, they claim that from March through mid-October 2020, we displayed warnings on over 165 million pieces of content on Facebook. Nearly 95% of the time people saw these warning labels, they did not click through to view the original post. But if the fact checkers were too politically biased and they used those fact checkers during the 2020 election, that means that Meta manipulated what people saw and therefore influenced voter behavior on a mass scale in a biased way during an election cycle. That's not just a minor mistake. That is mass manipulation engineered at the highest level by design. I mean, does anyone believe that no one at Meta knew these fact checkers were biased in the 9 years between when they first started the fact checking program in 2016 and ended it in 2025? Don't forget, this is the same company that makes internal docs on how they can utilize children's playdates to maximize revenue.
You were just lying to us about this, that, and the other thing, and now I'm supposed to believe you're one of the good guys. You're one of the straight shooters now.
Yeah.
But again, let's just take Meta's word for it. Mark is sorry. They've now discontinued the program, which stopped users from looking at 95% of the misinformation posts. So does that mean Meta is pro-misinformation now? Because they previously claimed they were suppressing most of the misinformation. So either they lied in writing about that 95% number back in 2020, or they just like misinformation now and they no longer care about stopping it.
It's not enough to just give people a voice. We need to make sure that people aren't using it to harm other people or to spread misinformation.
Personally, I actually really like this change because ever since then, Mark has been getting fried on his own platform. There's people on Facebook claiming that Mark received the first ever rat penis transplant. But factual information aside, the main issue here is the fact that Meta just automatically caves to whoever's in power at the time. And it all comes down to one thing: leverage. Someone can only tell someone else what to do if they have leverage on them. If I told Mark to stop making his platforms addictive, he would just ignore me because he has no incentive to actually listen to me. Nobody can tell Mark what to do except his wife and the federal government. His wife is a woman, and the federal government can put him in a cell, or at the very least, ruin his life with endless lawsuits. And that's the problem. Because Meta plays so dirty, the company's entire survival depends on avoiding regulation, antitrust actions, and government penalties. Their main business is hyper-targeted ads and exploiting gray zones in data privacy, so they're under constant legal scrutiny from both the left and the right.
The net effect of that is that we're kind of constantly making decisions that piss off people in both camps.
So by changing their policies whenever the tides turn, Meta is able to dodge lawsuits, investigations, or breakup threats preemptively. But if Meta was even reasonably normal and wasn't so obsessed with surveilling every inch of our lives, they wouldn't have to bend the knee whenever the government asked them to. However, acting normal doesn't make Zuck trillions, so he chose the high-risk, high-reward path instead, which in turn puts them on a leash. The problem is, the leverage shouldn't be this one-sided. The US government still needs billionaires like Zuck just as much as he needs them. In my opinion, Mark is incredibly short-sighted in this aspect. He built a company so unethical, it basically cannot survive without kneeling to power. Mark probably did not want to listen to the Biden administration when they told him what to do, but because he's guilty of the things that he knows they can accuse him of, he basically has no choice but to comply. And the fact of the matter is, no political party, left or right, should be able to strong-arm the company who's in control of the world's digital speech infrastructure.
It's just been very challenging for us to try to navigate what is a polarizing country in a principled way, where we're not trying to kind of hew to one side or the other. We're trying to do what we think is the right thing.
Verbally, that sounds great. Businesses in general should be apolitical. I'm not going to Dunkin' at 6:30 in the morning to debate abortion. But Meta is not being apolitical. They're being partisan towards whichever side is in power, which essentially guarantees that half the country dislikes them at any point in time. People are going to forget about what Meta did and said 4 years ago, but it's easy to remember how every time the tides turn, Mark has to also turn with that tide. According to a 2025 survey, Mark is still bipartisanly hated even after this rebrand. 60% of Republicans don't like Mark, and 76% of Democrats don't like Mark. And that's because Zuck doesn't actually stand for anything. He doesn't believe in free speech, censorship, democracy, connection. He only believes in whatever helps Meta at that moment in time. The words he says are just the vehicle which help him achieve what he wants. And I think it's terrible that he's put his company in a position where doing what's politically convenient is the only way to survive. That's not leadership, that's mandatory obedience.
Last week, weirdo, he's a weirdo, Mark Zuckerberg came to the White House, kissed my ass. Kissed my ass. Sir, I'd love to have dinner. Sure, I'd love to have dinner. I'd love to bring my lovely wife. All right, Mark, come on in. Sir, you're #1 on Facebook. I'd like to congratulate you. Oh, thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate it.
With that being said, I think it's worth examining Mark's incredible relationship with President Donald Trump so we can get the full picture as to why Mark switched up the way he did after Trump was elected. Mark has generally avoided explicit political endorsements throughout his career, but after Donald Trump won the 2016 election, Facebook caught a lot of flack from the left after the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal. On the other hand, Trump has always claimed that Facebook was against him, so Mark had both sides on his ass, and he had to start rebranding. During the 2020 election, Zuck and his wife donated over $400 million to organizations like the CTCL, which provided COVID safety supplies, staffing, and polling infrastructure nationwide. Trump called these donations the Zuckerbucks and accused him of using it to swing the election towards Biden. About 2 months before the 2024 election, Donald Trump published a $100 book called Save America, where he accused Mark of election interference in 2020, and the person who wrote this book for him explicitly wrote, if he does anything illegal this time, he'll spend the rest of his life in prison. After that, Mark essentially just fence-sat the entire election. No endorsement, no opinion, just fear. In 2021, shortly after the January 6th riots, Facebook banned Donald Trump from all of their services indefinitely. And in my opinion, that should make everyone kinda scared, because once a private company sets the precedent of banning a sitting US president, that means they can also do it to any other political figure from any party whenever it's convenient. Plus, it's also the complete opposite of what Mark has said in the past about censoring political figures.
Look, I just think that in a democracy, it's important for people to see for themselves what politicians are saying. And, political speech is some of the most scrutinized speech that is out there.
Now, I know many people disagree with this, but in general, I don't think it's right for a private company to censor politicians or the news in a democracy.
Donald Trump sued Mark and Meta for banning him, and then, only after Trump won the 2024 election, Zuck handed him a $25 million settlement. In my opinion, this was a bribe. Might not be a direct bribe, we can all act like this was just about the lawsuit, but if Mark was so passionate about giving Trump $25 million, why was the lawsuit only settled after Trump won the election? We certainly can't just act like the president won't at least keep that $25 million in mind next time the conversation of regulating big tech is brought up. I think this settlement was an attempt at establishing an oligarchy with the Trump administration, and it seems to be going pretty damn well so far. Just a few weeks after the election, Mark had dinner with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, and Zuck said this would be a year for resetting Meta's relationship with governments worldwide, which means they're going to kiss a lot of ass. Their president of global affairs is already a Republican power broker. They recently hired an ex-Trump Justice Department lawyer to be their head of global litigation strategy, and Mark recently bought a $23 million mansion in DC just a few miles away from the White House, so he can literally jog to the White House if he ever needs to. And funny enough, Meta just made a deal with a major US military contractor called Anduril Industries to integrate their VR and AR tech into combat training and battlefield operations for the US military through Anduril's defense contracts. And it's kind of crazy that Anduril's founder, Palmer Luckey, was actually the founder of Oculus, which Zuck bought from him in 2014. And Palmer just so happens to be plugged deep into Republican defense networks. I'm sure it's all just a coincidence though, because under the new Trump administration, the defense budget is about to explode. And now, one of the guys kissing Trump's ass is cashing in on the increased defense budget. This ass kissing has gone so far, Mark apparently even got to crash a confidential meeting about fighter jets in the Oval Office. And that's exactly what the country needs right now. We don't need help with the $10 carton of eggs at the grocery store. We need Mark Zuckerberg running military ops. One of my primary concerns in the 2024 election was actually how little Mark Zuckerberg was involved with defense contracting. And I'm just so glad that Palmer, Mark, and Trump were able to get this resolved.
This is what I believe, and I believe it strongly. And I think that other people can decide for themselves what they think is right, but this is who I am. And that's, yeah.
President Donald Trump also recently said that he's going to stand up to countries that attack American tech companies, and in my opinion, this is pretty dumb. This post reads as unconditional support, and anytime we're unconditionally supporting anything, anyone, or any cause, we're wrong. Let's be real, the only people even trying to hold big tech accountable right now are the Europeans. GDPR, the Digital Services Act, and the Digital Markets Act. They're all attempts to try and rein big tech in. Are they perfect? Of course not. Regulating big tech is an almost impossible job to do well, but clearly no one's trying to hold them accountable in America, so the very least we could do is not threaten them for trying. However, he's saying this because guys like Mark have effectively built an oligarchy with his administration. The problem with that is the second someone makes a bad move on either side, it's all gonna crash and burn, just like what we saw with the Elon situation earlier this year. And even if it doesn't all come crashing down, it's a fake friendship. You can't partner with a snake long term. Mark is just gonna switch up the second he gets the chance, because none of the words he says actually mean anything. None of the donations mean anything, because his company doesn't have any actual principles besides protecting themselves. No matter who's in charge at the time, Mark and his company will keep kneeling for whoever's in charge for the next 4 years. Not even because they want to, but because Mark has put them in a position where they have to. But I think the main thing which proves just how fake Mark is, and why this rebrand shouldn't be trusted at all, is just how inauthentic Mark has been in the past in an attempt to reinvent his image. In 2015, Mark and his wife Priscilla pledged to give away 99% of their Meta stock over their lifetimes. Around that same time, they also started something called the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and to be honest, it's absolutely incredible. I think CZI is one of the greatest, most visionary, definitely not a tax shelter companies in the history of humanity. But look, I'm not very smart, so let's just have Priscilla explain what CZI is.
In 2015, we launched the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and what we were hoping to do at CZI was think about how do we build a better future for everyone, and looking for ways where we can contribute the resources that we have to bring philanthropically and the experiences that Mark and I have had, for me as a physician and educator, for Mark as an engineer, and then our ability to bring teams together to build builders.
What in the world is she talking about? She just spoke for 30 seconds, and I'm now more confused as to what exactly CZI actually does. That sounded like she plagiarized her company's value proposition off of a LinkedIn post that got 6 likes. But whatever, let's give her another shot at this.
Within our science portfolio, we've really been focused on what some people think is either an incredibly audacious goal or a inevitable goal, but I think about it as something that will happen if we sort of continue focusing on it, which is to be able to cure, prevent, or manage all disease by the end of the century.
All disease.
All disease.
So Priscilla knows that her husband literally profits off of an engineered addiction, and last time I checked, addiction is a disease, but instead of trying to cure the disease that they built, they go on a podcast expecting an applause for trying to cure all other diseases. I mean, it's just amazing. I actually really respect rich people like this, because even though they're physically on Earth, they're basically in outer space. Like, these people think that because they did ayahuasca one time, their brains have elevated so far from reality that everyone else is just living on a plane of existence that's beneath them.
I think people have a pretty good ear for kind of understanding what is authentic and what is what's real.
In all seriousness, I'm sure they try to cure diseases at CZI. That's pretty vague anyways, and no one's gonna be mad if they don't, right? But the reality is, CZI is a self-serving organization that also sometimes does helpful things. The company was set up as an LLC, not a 501c charity, so they don't have to actually disclose how much of the money actually goes to charity versus political or business ventures. So although CZI is allegedly all about helping the world, just like Facebook, they get to decide what that means. And that's what makes CZI genuinely dangerous. It's a weaponized LLC that allows one of the most powerful men on Earth to spend like a charity but operate like a corporation. For example, 1 month before the 2020 election, CZI funded a bunch of ballot initiatives in California, which led to things like criminal justice reforms, which sounds nice, right? But in reality, these donations give Mark political goodwill with California progressives, so the next time he's under fire as a monopolist, for example, this type of thing gives him leverage. So they use this alleged charity to push a political agenda without ever having to publicly disclose the extent of their involvement. That is not philanthropy. That's using money to launder influence under the guise of charity. And if you thought that was bad, in 2016, Mark and Priscilla founded a non-profit K-12 private school in Palo Alto called The Primary School for children with low-income families. And that is amazing. Mark is obviously very passionate about helping children. Just look at this picture. They're holding an infant and a book that says Quantum Physics for Babies. So it's great that they sometimes use their excessive amount of resources to help people. But if we fast forward about a decade later, in April of 2025, the primary school announced that it would be closing at the end of the 2026 school year without even bothering to explain why. Some sources have claimed that the school is closing because CZI pulled its funding, which would make sense because the chairman of the board at the primary school previously admitted the school was overly dependent on funding from CZI. Now, if they did pull the funding, that makes no sense. Zuck has enough money to buy each of their 500 plus students and myself a $2 million mansion, and it wouldn't even make a dent in his bank account. But the real issue here is that, yet again, this clearly isn't actually about philanthropy. Launching a private school for disadvantaged kids makes for some great headlines, but quietly abandoning them 10 years later once the spotlight fades, not so much. But the biggest reason I think CZI is nothing but a PR move is because they're not even fundraising money for it. They're using their own money to pay for everything, which means Mark and his wife could be doing all of the exact same charity work 100% privately and nothing would change at all. However, The point of CZI isn't actually to help people. The point of CZI's existence is for Mark and his wife to publicly do good things in front of a camera in an attempt to ensure they can be perceived as good people. And at the end of the day, we're all messed up in one way or another. There's no need to do this, oh look at me, I'm a good person, I give money to charity. Anyone with half a brain can see right through this crap, so I just think people should be more transparent about what's really going on.
I have no honesty with myself or others. I am a shell of a human being, genuine shell of a human being. I live to entertain people, to make them happy for nothing, for no reason. I barely enjoy that. It's just what I have to do. I'm built to do nothing else. I'm just a vector of negative energy that will either go into a heroin needle or go into a stupid joke. I tell it fucking, the giggle pig, which should be the name of a comedy club and isn't. Welcome to the Giggle Pig. Don't take out your phones. This is art.
Ultimately, just the fact that Mark still tries to be the face of the company to this day shows how delusional he's become over the years. Some might even say he's a dumb Mark genuinely believes that he can single-handedly manage being the visionary CEO and the one-man marketing team all at once. He's basically trying to do what Steve Jobs and Elon Musk did. But the difference is that at least Elon and Steve had a sliver of charisma and cute autistic guy type of likability. Mark doesn't even have that. Mark is just an unlikable person. Even if you don't know anything about him, he's awkward, he's weird, and in general, he gives off bad vibes.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you ready?
But here's the thing, Mark can just go be awkward and evil in private. He doesn't need to be a public figure who goes on podcasts just to be cringe.
I mean, have you ever felt socially awkward over your years?
No, I'm really smooth.
Okay.
No, obviously. Yes. Yeah, I'm like the most awkward person. People have been calling me a robot online for 20 years. It does wonders for my confidence.
Most people don't know Google's CEO, Sundar Pichai. Why? Because CEOs don't need to plaster their face everywhere just to prove how important they are. They show it through the actual work that they do. But 20 years later, Mark still thinks he's Steve Jobs reincarnated. But he's not Steve Jobs. He's like a more Jewish but less funny version of McLovin. And it all comes down to one thing. Ego. Mark tries his best to hide how insane he is when he's in front of the camera, but the insanity still slips out every now and then.
I mean, some of the folks who I work with at the company, they say this lovingly, but I think that they sometimes refer to my attention as the Eye of Sauron, in that basically you have this unending amount of energy to go work on something, and if you like point that at any given team, you will just burn them.
Just to make this clear, the people who work with him on a day-to-day basis nicknamed him the Eye of Sauron, as in the soul-melting force of evil that corrupts everything it sees. As a joke, that's funny, but jokes typically have some truth baked in, and the people who know him best chose to call him that for free while sober, and he's bragging about it. But this is exactly what happens when an already messed up guy, like Mark was back at Harvard, is constantly surrounded by people whose entire livelihood depends on them. Then all they do is work all day, every day. They end up just getting more and more messed up over time.
He needs a handler. Yeah. He needs like somebody that'll come. He's got to hire somebody and go, send me 3 guys. And they got to beat the fuck out of me when I start acting crazy. Right. Because he's crazy.
Everything about Mark is just calculated PR, but the PR can never truly work because he's fundamentally inhuman. Listen to any 2 Zuck interviews back to back. The main thing you'll notice is that he speaks almost entirely in pre-written scripts. There's no actual beliefs Mark and his company hold aside from PR. Mark has time and time again switched up on things which should be core values in the pursuit of personal gain. And sure, certain things might have been necessary, but I don't think anyone should respect the words of a man who uses principles as marketing strategies. So no matter how many haircuts Mark gets, or what gold chain or watch he's wearing that day, the underlying truth does not change. Zuck will always be the exact same evil tech overlord underneath whatever external facade he's putting on at that time.
This is a man who wears many different costumes.
When I was there, he, wanted the president of China to name his first child. He was learning Mandarin. That was, he was censoring to his heart's content. Now his new costume is MMA fighting or whatever, free speech. We don't know what the next costume's going to be, but it'll be something different. It's whatever gets him closest to power.
Suddenly, the world I used to know, I see it differently. You woke me from a dream, now here's reality. Baby, baby, you are really hurting me. 'Cause every time you tell me I look good in bed, I'm doing fine. But nothing ever changes. And now I see, baby, you are hurting me.
Mark Zuckerberg is undoubtedly one of the most successful, richest, and most powerful men to ever walk the planet. When someone is this driven, this ambitious, and this good at their job in a capitalistic society, people should genuinely admire what they've been able to achieve. Yet, Mark has managed to become the exact opposite of admirable. He's so bad that even the people who don't know anything about him are repulsed by just the idea of Mark Zuckerberg. And that's because when your entire business model is built on knowingly doing harm, lying, and manipulating people at scale, it doesn't just rot society, it rots you. Most people mess up every now and then. That's normal. But Mark rarely makes mistakes. He makes decisions. Mark has real victims out there. There's parents whose children were exploited or even died because of his platforms and their negligence. And when Mark was finally forced to face those parents in Congress, this is how he responded.
You didn't take any action. You didn't fire anybody. You haven't compensated a single victim. Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. There's families of victims here today. Have you apologized to the victims? Would you like to do so now?
Well,
they're here. You're on national television. Would you like now to apologize to the victims who have been harmed by your product? Show them the pictures. Would you like to apologize for what you've done to these good people?
I'm sorry for everything that you've all been through. It's terrible, and no one should have to go through the things that your families have suffered. And this is why we invested so much and are going to continue doing these extremely big efforts to make sure that no one has to go through the types of things that your families have had to suffer.
Hypothetically, if his own family had been victimized, would his company do more for child safety? Undoubtedly, yes. But when it's other people's children, all the families get is a fake, scripted apology, and his company will just continue to do the bare minimum until they're forced to do otherwise. That's just one example. When you've got 100 scandals that bad or worse that you know you've done over the years, I think that kind of rot shows up everywhere else. So of course Mark comes off as robotic and weird. You would be weird too if you were walking around with the pent-up guilt of 1,000 men sitting in jail right this second. Mark is probably on pace to become a trillionaire, but he doesn't even bother taking care of the people who helped him build his empire. Sure, his company pays people well, but the second he can, he'll replace his engineers with AI. The second he got the chance to turn a sizable percentage of his users into addicts, he did it. Instead of looking out for the people who helped him get this mansion, this yacht, or this private jet, Mark decided to turn his co-founder and best friend into a business decision. He turned his human users into data points, other people's children into victims. The thing is, lying, cheating, and stealing is human. Doing those things constantly, without remorse, is abnormal, and eventually, that catches up to you.
Form is temporary, and class is permanent. Naval's got this great quote where he says, karma is just people repeating their beliefs, actions, and behaviors until they finally get what they deserve. You just roll the dice. You keep rolling the dice, right? Every single time, every single thing you do, the way that you interact with the Uber driver, the way that you pay or don't pay the bill or invoice that you've got, every tiny little thing, each time is an opportunity for your true nature to come out. And people just keep on rolling the dice. Keep on rolling the dice, and then every so often someone hits double one, and you go, oh, there we go.
Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but in general, I think the universe has a way of evening the score. Mark will sooner or later pay for all the people he's taken advantage of. You can only exploit human connection for so long before people start to snap back. At a certain point, Meta is going to cross the line, and people will inevitably move on to something better. But hypothetically, even if there are no consequences, history is certainly going to be the one to hold Mark accountable. I mean, this is a guy who wasn't even the hero of his own movie. Zuck won't be remembered as the genius or visionary that he desperately wants to be known as. People in the future will know Mark as the man who tried to turn human connection into behavioral data.
Just as a human being, how does it feel though, when you're giving so much of your day-to-day life to try to heal division, to try to do good in the world, as we've talked about, that so many people in the US, the place you call home, have a negative view of you as a leader, as a human being, and the company you love?
Well, I mean, it's not great.
The problem with Mark isn't that he's some sort of slick-talking salesman in a suit. He's not evil in the Hollywood villain sense. He's way worse. He's the perfect embodiment of Silicon Valley technocrat. He's the guy who's deluded himself into believing that the world would be better if more people just use his products, even when those products demonstrably hurt a sizable portion of people. Mark is really interesting to me because at one point in time, he had this golden opportunity to change the world for the better. Facebook and Instagram had the potential to be some of the greatest inventions in all of human history. I mean, nobody is against technology that genuinely helps people connect and introduces them to new people. If these apps were just built with a shred of decency, the social aspect of almost everyone's life would be better, or at the very least, not worse. Yet, Mark chose to ignore that potential net positive he could have had in everyone's lives in the pursuit of increased engagement. If Mark had simply helped people connect in ways that made their lives richer and not emptier, he would have gone down as a legend. And although I understand it's impossible to run a platform at the scale Meta does without making some bad decisions every now and then, nobody ever expected perfection from Facebook and Instagram, just decency. But even that was too much for Mark. He chose harm. The craziest part is, Mark could have done just 1/4 of the bad things and still gotten unfathomably rich. But in this case, common sense is irrelevant. Mark needs more money, more influence, and more power. And those are all great things. But when you already have an abundance, it's easy to put the blinders on and forget what the real goal should be.
Big ridiculous question. What do you think is the meaning of life?
Probably the thing that I go to first is just that human connection is the meaning. And I mean, I think that it's a thing that our society probably systematically undervalues. I mean, I just remember, when I was growing up and in school, it's like, do your homework and then go play with your friends after. And it's like, no, well, what if playing with your friends is the point?
It sounds great coming out of his mouth, but then he goes to the office and his actions prove that if using someone as a pawn results in a 0.03% increase in engagement, Mark will do it without blinking. And the main reason why he's able to do that is because to Mark, the customers were never real people to begin with, just data points and variables in a giant A/B test.
I miss hugging my mom, right? Like, that never goes away.
Yeah, haptics is hard.
Yeah.
But
and so
that might sound like a joke, but the sad part is he actually thinks like that. And that's exactly what happens when you don't prioritize connection. Mark never had to earn a real laugh from a friend. Mark never had to win people over with anything besides money or power. Mark's been insulated in a $1 billion office since he was 21. And when that all gets combined, you don't just lose touch with reality, you lose your humanity.
I think there's times where, yeah, you seem like a guy who probably like watched a video of how to be a guy on YouTube or something, you know?
Mark probably doesn't even see himself as a bad guy, because in his heart of hearts, he's convinced himself that the ends justify the means. But what Mark clearly fails to realize is that if there's no real end, then the ends can never justify the means. Because there's nothing to justify, it just becomes this infinite loop of optimization.
A happy person wants 10,000 things. A sick person just wants one thing. Right? So it's your unlimited desires that are clouding your peace, your happiness. Have desires. You're a biological creature that stands up and says, I can do something. I move, I resist, I live. But just be very careful of your desires.
One thing's for certain, Mark didn't kill human connection. He just monetized it, did everything he could to digitize it, and then he made sure that it would die quietly, on schedule, and at scale. And now, it's on the users to start pushing back. It's 2025. There's no denying how negligent our regulators are when it comes to big tech. But the power is 100% in the hands of the people. If people simply stop doom scrolling and stop giving their attention away without even thinking about it, even for a month, Meta would be forced to be better. The entire business model would start to crack. Doesn't have to be a full-on boycott, but if each user just made a conscious choice to limit their time online, Mark would probably be hiding in his bunker by the end of the month. I mean, this stuff isn't new anymore. We have the statistics, we have unlimited access to direct communication with others, so at a certain point, it's on us to make the best decisions for ourselves.
Because the technology is just going to get better and better, and it's going to get easier and easier and more convenient and more pleasurable to sit alone with images on a screen given to us by people who do not love us but want our money. And that's fine in low doses, but if it's the basic main staple of your diet, you're going to die.
Well, come on.
In a very meaningful way. You're going to die.
No one's going to drop dead because they scrolled Facebook and Instagram too much. But there's a lot of people out there who are so used to staring at a screen for so many hours a day that they're not even going to get the chance to live properly. Just think of how easy it is to trade away hours, days, even years of your life for cheap dopamine hits just because some algorithm made it convenient. On Mark's platforms, that's the entire business model. Their success depends on keeping people stuck, and they're going to continue to do whatever they can to ensure that they win and that the customers lose.
And if this is the future that you want to see, then I hope that you will join us, because the future is going to be beyond anything we can imagine.
The real question is, if we know we only get one shot at life, why waste even 1% of it making Mark Zuckerberg richer? Some people might be fine with the trade-off, but I know I'm not.
So, what do you think you'll do? How are you going to spend your life?
I'm not sure. But I do know. I'm gonna live every minute of it.
If you like this video, call an old friend, see how they're doing. After that, I think you might love this video on the screen right now about Patrick Bet-David. He's one of the worst grifters on all of YouTube. Or maybe this one on the screen right now about Andrew Tate. If you like the video, like it. If you disliked it, dislike it. If you want to support the channel, you can become a member. And aside from that, I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Mark, give me the Zuck.